Hey everyone, per your requests, I'm starting Soul Land 5, the Rebirth of Tang San today. My channel isn't monetized, so if you're able to, please support me on PayPal to help me stay active. Chapters 581 through 600 of the previous episode. In the doubles finals, Tang San empowers Mei Gongzi to neutralize their foe's ultimate strike, securing the championship. After claiming their rewards, they flee the ancestral court using a teleportation array crafted by Tang San. However, they are ambushed by the terrifying Tenebrous Demon Emperor. To ensure Mei Gongzi's escape, Tang San stays behind. He uses his sword Saint tokens and summons a phantom of his former sea god self to halt the pursuit. Believed dead by all, Tang San secretly survives, slowly regenerating his ruined body in the wilderness using his space-time beacon. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Soul Land 5, the Rebirth of Tang San. A long time passed. To Tang San it felt infinite. He remained in a very peculiar state. When everything was gone, leaving only a bit of his divine consciousness, he was in a state somewhere between existence and void. After all, he wasn't even a god. How could he possibly contend with an emperor? No matter how much knowledge and experience he had from his past life, without a proper foundation in this life, it was impossible to fight against an emperor of this world. The gap between them was simply too vast. However, he certainly wouldn't give up because of this. Even without the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor's reminder, he had already begun preparing long ago. For Mei Gongzi, he had given up being low-key, instead accompanying her to compete and win. But during this process, Tang San had already considered the dangers that he and Mei Gongzi might face after the competition. After all, the Peacock Demon clan no longer had the status it had had under the rule of the Peacock Demon Emperor. As the saying goes, the tree that stands out in the forest will be toppled by the wind. Without a strong backer, it was obvious what they would face. They could seek help from those emperors who might be beneficial to them, but in doing so, the Peacock Demon clan would have to side with their benefactor and would never be able to stand independently like before. Whether it was the White Tiger Demon Emperor or the Sword Saint Demon Emperor, their protection wouldn't be unconditional. This wasn't what the Peacock Great Demon King wanted, nor what Mei Gongzi wanted. Tang San was even more unwilling to let his beloved be dependent on others. Therefore, he had long been preparing for their departure. Why hadn't he let his companions leave with them? Why had he separated from Big Cat? It was all for this final moment. Tang San didn't know which emperor might be against them, and he wouldn't have been surprised if it had been the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor himself. Therefore, his hypothetical enemy had always been an emperor. In his previous life, he had two godly seats. One was the Sea God seat, and the other was the Azura God seat, which his wife held on his behalf. Both godly seats were at the God King level, and each possessed their own innate divine weapon. After countless years of nurturing, they had both become transcendent divine artifacts. The Azura God's innate divine weapon was naturally the Azura Divine Sword, which Tang San had connected to through Mei Gongzi, and had used to decisively defeat Meng Didi. So what about himself? Tang San, being the reincarnation of the God King, had never lost his connection with his own innate divine weapon. However, during his reincarnation and rebirth, it was impossible to carry a transcendent divine artifact with him, so he had come alone, leaving the transcendent divine artifact elsewhere. As his divine consciousness gradually recovered, his connection with the transcendent divine artifact was naturally re-established. After all, if he could help Mei Gongzi connect with the Azura Sword, how could he not connect with his own super divine artifact? This was his true trump card, the one trump card that allowed him to actually contend with emperors. The Sea God's Trident, also known as the Golden Trident. Although what he could summon now was still a projection, the power of the Sea God's Trident that he could summon was far beyond that of the Azura Sword. After all, this was his own divine weapon, the one he'd used the longest. Moreover, in terms of distance, the Sea God's Trident was also much closer. During the competition, Tang San never even entertained the thought of using the Sea God's Trident. This trump card could not be revealed, but he knew that he would end up using it. Thus, the amethystine coins he had absorbed had enhanced his divine consciousness and strengthened his connection with the Sea God's Trident. Long-distance teleportation was the first step in escaping from the ancestral court, but Tang San never thought that such teleportation alone would allow them to completely evade pursuit. If it were that simple, there would have been no need for the Master of Destiny to give a reminder. Tang San understood well that the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor's words were not just a reminder, but also a form of pressure. The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor might not target Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Demon clan, but his inability to see through Tang San meant he would not leave him unchecked. A calamity worthy of being mentioned by the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor was sure to be a truly terrifying calamity. Therefore, Tang San had already made preparations before setting out. To escape the control of the Master of Destiny, the simplest way was to make his own destiny vanish completely. If he had no destiny, then the Master of Destiny naturally had no reason to bother with him. Therefore Azura had to die. Only through Azura's death would the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor no longer be locked onto Tang San's fate. How could he thus achieve this? Of course it was simple. He had to die. The appearance of the sea god was still just an illusory figure, but to the tenebrous demon emperor, it brought immense pressure. If just an illusory figure caused such great pressure for the 6th-ranked demon emperor, then what about the real body of the sea god? To the tenebrous demon emperor, Azura was nothing but a vessel, a medium for the sea god, or rather the sea god's messenger. A vessel that was not divine just yet could not contain divine power at that level. After unleashing such power, the vessel would naturally shatter. Azura truly perished, at least in that final moment. But it was Azura who perished. The real Tang San quietly disappeared into a spatial temporal point, to reappear only when the pre-programmed spatial temporal point arrived. Everything was planned down to the tiniest detail. At the moment of Azura's demise and Tang San's disappearance, his life truly vanished, leaving only a bit of his divine consciousness essence stored in the amethyst. His lifeless body was preserved in one spatial temporal point by the space-time beacon, while his divine consciousness was separated elsewhere. In other words, at that moment, with the sea god's power as cover, 99% of his divine consciousness was used to sustain the sea god's power, while the remaining 1% was isolated in the amethyst. Such a phenomenon would appear as true death in this plane. Even the power of the blood oath would dissipate, not that it would have done anything otherwise. The oath had been done to reassure Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Great Demon King, as well as to establish a connection between him and Mei Gongzi. But it was not truly binding. How could it be binding to a divine consciousness like Tang San's? And when everything was over, his body was returned to its original place by the space-time beacon, and the amethyst happened to appear there. At the moment of their contact, his divine consciousness returned to his body, and with the immense energy of the amethyst nurturing that minuscule bit of divine consciousness still inside it, Tang San was able to be reborn. This sounded simple, but in reality, to deceive any emperor, let alone an emperor who controlled fate, was unimaginably difficult. Without the experience of a former god king, precise control over his divine consciousness, and absolute confidence, Tang San wouldn't have dared to attempt this. In this process, even the slightest mistake could prevent his divine consciousness from returning, resulting in his true death. His divine consciousness would be forever sealed within the amethyst, with no telling when he could be revived. Therefore, before undertaking this, Tang San had activated his polar luck domain to its fullest extent, greatly enhancing his fortune. He perfectly utilized the space-time beacon to ensure contact between his body and the amethyst. When he opened his eyes and looked at the sky, he found it full of stars. He had died at night and he had come back to life at night. Tang San himself did not know how many days had passed since the incident. The surroundings were completely silent, with not even the sound of insects or birds, clearly due to the lingering fear from the tenebrous demon emperor's earlier presence. With that in mind, it was likely that it hadn't been that long. His body felt weak and limp. Although his divine consciousness had returned and was mostly restored thanks to the amethyst, further adjustments were still needed. Fortunately, the amethyst's nurturing of his divine consciousness was indeed powerful. Otherwise, Tang San would have had to rely entirely on the space-time beacon to sustain his remaining bit of divine consciousness. In that case, he had no idea how long it would have taken to fully restore his divine consciousness to its previous state. Supporting himself to get up, Tang San silently sensed the changes in his body. Dying and being reborn was not as plain and simple as it sounded. Some of his own self had already disappeared when he'd chosen reincarnation last time. And now that his divine consciousness had returned, although it had reignited the flame of life, it didn't help his body much. He still needed to gradually recover. Moreover, summoning the trident and truly utilizing the power of the sea god had consumed a tremendous amount of his energy, almost depleting the majority of the foundation he had accumulated over the years. But it wasn't without benefits. Firstly, although his divine consciousness was greatly weakened, its level had been somewhat restored due to the influence of the sea god's aura. While it was now lower in energy, it was higher in terms of divinity. Secondly, using the sea god's trident allowed the transcendent divine artifact to better confirm his location. It was now moving much faster and would arrive much sooner. Finally, after being baptized by the sea god's power, the overlap between his current body and his previous one had increased significantly, allowing his body to undergo a true transformation. The power of this plane was still great, and Tang San needed more time to comprehend it, and integrate it with the power from his previous life. He sat cross-legged in meditation, and when he woke up again, daylight had already broken. Tang San activated a bloodline imprint and a pair of wings unfolded behind him, lifting him into the sky. Among all the bloodline imprints, the first to be revived was the Dragon Rock. This place was not suitable for a prolonged stay. There was nothing here for him. He thus decided to return to the Golden Valley. There, he could peacefully restore his cultivation and digest what he had gained in the ancestral court. The massive amethyst had lost most of its energy, but Tang San still kept it rather than throwing it away. He found that, perhaps due to its larger size or maybe because it was in its raw form, it differed from the amethystine coins. Once the energy inside the amethystine coins was exhausted, they would shatter and turn to dust. By contrast, this piece of amethyst seemed to slowly absorb energy from the surroundings, gradually restoring itself. Although the recovery was slow, it was still gradually happening. This item was incredibly helpful for his divine consciousness. With it, Tang San's divine consciousness had recovered by over 2/3, even with the increase in level. Without it, it would have been seriously troublesome. It would have taken him at least a year to return to normal. The evolution of his divine consciousness also allowed it to better nurture his spiritual power. His strength was gradually recovering by the moment. On the other hand, Tang San wasn't in a hurry to restore all his bloodline powers. Instead, he used his divine consciousness to slowly cleanse his reborn body. He didn't need to look with his eyes. His divine consciousness could vaguely sense some changes in himself. The most obvious change was that, due to his rebirth and the influence of his divine consciousness, his appearance had undergone slight adjustments, making him look more like he did in his previous life. Among these adjustments, his hair color had changed to the sea blue of his past life. Unless someone was very familiar with him and saw him face to face, they would have a hard time recognizing him. With the changes in his eyes and hair color, and especially if he wore a mask, no one would be able to identify him as Azura. Although his strength had decreased compared to before, he was confident that he would recover soon. Moreover, he had taken a significant step toward regaining the strength he'd had in his previous life. Given enough time, he was confident that he could restore the splendor of his former god king self. Of course, the most crucial step was undergoing the tribulation to become a god. Thus, he needed to prepare for that critical moment. For him, there might only be one chance. To avoid interference from this plane and successfully undergo the tribulation, he needed to utilize every available resource. It took him 2 whole days to reach Golden Valley. The consecutive teleportations had left him fairly close to the Kali Mountains before his death, but due to his decrease in cultivation post-rebirth, he had no choice but to take it slow. Passing through the linked arrays, he returned to that familiar place. And as soon as he entered the Golden Valley, Tang San immediately felt the overwhelming breath of life energy surging toward him. In terms of sheer energy, the Golden Valley couldn't compare to the Ancestral Court. But the difference was that the energy in the Ancestral Court was a torrent of mixed attribute energies, while the one in the Golden Valley was pure life energy. The new golden tree, nourished by various means, was growing increasingly robust. "Who goes there?" A deep voice rang out, and immediately several figures surrounded Tang San. Tang San glanced at his sea blue hair and couldn't help but feel a bit helpless. "It's me, Azura." The ones surrounding him were strong members of the Lion Tiger clan. After resolving the bloodline conflict, the strength of these adult members of the Lion Tiger clan had grown by leaps and bounds. With first-tier bloodlines and the abundant life energy in Golden Valley, their fur looked crystalline and shiny, their bodies were strong, their vitality flourishing, and their eyes filled with fierce and sharp light. "Benefactor." The leading Lion Tiger clansman looked at Tang San with some uncertainty. After taking a closer look, he seemed to decide that he was indeed Azura. It's good to see you, but why is your hair blue? Is that the trend in the Ancestral Court now?" Tang San replied helplessly, "It's due to cultivation. Is everything okay in the valley? Is the elder here? I have something to discuss with him." "The elder is here. I'll take you to him." The Lion Tiger clansman quickly led Tang San into the valley. At that moment, the Lion Tiger clan's grand elder was under the ancient golden tree, drinking water infused with its essence, enjoying the nourishment of life energy. "Benefactor, what's going on with you?" The grand elder didn't pause for a second before recognizing Tang San. Although Tang San's hair color had changed and his appearance was somewhat different, the old demon still had keen senses. Tang San smiled wryly. "I encountered some situations, so my body underwent some changes. But it's okay, I'll recover in a while." Hearing this, the grand elder became a bit anxious. "Big cat, little cat, they." Tang San quickly said, "Don't worry, elder. They're all fine. Tang San then detailed how Big Cat participated in the Ancestral Court's elite competition and won second place in the individual competition, thus gaining the lion race's recognition. Big Cat now possessed the god-slaying sword and the heart-guarding divine mirror, and was preparing to undergo his tribulation in the Ancestral Court. Hearing his words, the look in the Grand Elder's eyes grew complex. Undoubtedly, Big Cat becoming stronger and having the potential to become a god was a great thing for the Lion-Tiger clan. However, their time in Golden Valley had been an unprecedented period of prosperity for the entire clan. Here everyone could live well, and with the nourishment of life energy the entire clan was thriving. Big Cat gaining the lion race's recognition meant the Lion-Tiger clan finally had a path forward. But leaving here to join the Golden Lion clan, was that truly a good thing? The Grand Elder wasn't so sure, and neither was anyone else. Tang San said solemnly, for long-term development, cooperation with the lion race is for the best. Big Cat has proven through the competition that the Lion-Tiger clan's bloodline is a true first-tier bloodline, capable of producing demon emperors. The Lion-Tiger clan will surpass both the lion and the tiger races in the future. And if Big Cat does become a demon emperor, then the Lion-Tiger clan will truly be reborn. I think it's worth a try, and Big Cat thinks so too. He is determined to move in that direction. The Grand Elder nodded silently and said, "He is right. I'm old and no longer have the drive, but he's still young, and I can completely trust the future of the Lion-Tiger clan to him. I will guard the rear for him. Once he breaks through, he can take the young ones from the clan with him. Benefactor, may I ask if the old, young, and women can stay here, at least to ensure the Lion-Tiger clan's bloodline survives? In case..." "Of course." Tang San interrupted him. He understood the Grand Elder's concerns. After all, the Lion-Tiger clan had faced many hardships and had only recently resolved their bloodline conflict. It was completely natural for this diligent and hard-working Grand Elder to be worried. Golden Valley will always be the home of the Lion-Tiger clan. "Thank you, Benefactor." The Grand Elder was about to bow to Tang San, but the latter stopped him. "Grand Elder, I will be staying here for a while to heal my injuries and to strengthen the defenses of Golden Valley." With the growth of the ancient golden tree, the life energy within the valley had become increasingly strong. Although the illusion arrays could still conceal this area and prevent life energy from leaking out, the life energy was affecting the vegetation around the valley. When Tang San returned, he noticed that many plants were growing much more luxuriantly than those in more distant areas. If this attracted attention, it would be a major problem. His current cultivation level was far beyond what it had been when he first set up the illusion arrays. Both his strength and resources were much more abundant. It was necessary to reconfigure the arrays, expanding the range of Golden Valley and better containing the life energy to prevent any leakage. This would also more effectively isolate everything within the valley. Moreover, he needed to process his gains from the Ancestral Court, which would also involve significant energy fluctuations, so the level of insulation required was also much higher. "No problem. If there is anything the Lion-Tiger clan can help with, just let us know. The young ones in the clan see you as an idol. They are all willing to follow you." "Good. I'll take you up on that." Tang San wouldn't stand on ceremony. There were indeed some tasks that required manpower, and everyone had to earn their daily bread. For the next entire week, he was busy setting up the arrays. Using various resources he had brought back, he expanded and enhanced the illusion arrays around Golden Valley, increasing their number to 81 and creating a much larger array. This ensured that even an emperor flying overhead wouldn't notice anything amiss below if they didn't directly enter the array. At the same time, he enhanced the spirit summoning array's power, providing more energy to the golden tree to aid its growth. After a week, Tang San's various bloodline imprints had mostly recovered. Only his divine consciousness had not yet returned to its optimal state. He wasn't in a hurry. Although his divine consciousness was weakened, its recovery rate was much higher than before. After completing the arrangements in Golden Valley, it was time to thoroughly absorb the good things he had obtained earlier. Tang San did not want to feel again the sense of powerlessness he'd felt while being chased by the tenebrous demon emperor. But in the future, he would inevitably face beings of this level, so he had to make preparations to withstand such power. The Chrono Croc Essence Blood and the Golden Rock Essence Blood he obtained in the Ancestral Court had already been given to Gu Li and Chang Zicheng. Last time he returned, he used the foxtail relics to enhance the bloodlines of the Crimson Fox Girls. As their bloodlines were purified, their strength increased significantly. The weakest among them was now at the 5th order, and Red One had even reached the 7th order. On the Demon Continent, The strength of one's bloodline was the best indicator of their potential power. Thus, by purifying their bloodline, the foxtail relics had raised the ceiling of their cultivation, which was about as important as it could be. Aside from these items, the most important one was the space-time beacon. It wasn't just a nascent divine artifact, but could even be considered a transcendent divine artifact. Even though he hadn't yet refined it, Tang San had already used its power multiple times. Besides the space-time beacon, there was also the massive black crow stone. Tang San had long thought about how to use it. Moreover, with his current cultivation level, he could reforge Sky Shatter and truly make good use of the properties of the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron. Whether for refining the black crow stone into black gold or working on the space-time beacon, a suitable tool was essential. Thus, after careful consideration, Tang San decided first to reforge the hammer. Tang San chose a suitable location to install his forge, and had the Crimson Fox girls guard the perimeter, while he set up several isolation arrays inside to block sound and energy before starting the forging process. The most important characteristic of Heavenly Fire Essence Iron was that it couldn't be forged using external force. Its intense heat could burn through any material. To forge it, one needed to temper it with spiritual power, ideally with divine consciousness, in order to unleash its true power. The original Sky Shatterer could be described as merely half-baked. It had been turned into the shape of a hammer, but it wasn't truly forged. Tang San's previous cultivation was insufficient, so he hadn't bothered to attempt it either, merely using the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron to purify his spiritual power and the hammer as, well, a warhammer. But now his divine consciousness had recovered significantly, and its level had also increased, making it possible to forge the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron. Sky Shatterer floated quietly in front of Tang San. Due to the insulation arrays, the temperature inside the cave had noticeably increased. Tang San enveloped Sky Shatterer with his spiritual power, silently sensing its changes. Heavenly Fire Essence Iron was the most powerful fire attribute metal, extremely active by nature. The intense energy waves were arrogant and fierce, capable of even burning divine consciousness. Since Tang San had previously guided it many times with his spiritual power, Sky Shatterer had a relatively close spiritual connection with him and did not reject his spiritual power. A faint smile appeared on Tang San's face as purple light flickered in his eyes. His spiritual power, enhanced through the purple demon eyes, directly enveloped the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron. The Heavenly Fire Essence Iron vibrated slightly for a moment before intense heat burst outward. While it was true that only spiritual power could forge it, the strength of that spiritual power mattered. The metal could quite literally ignite spiritual power, even turning it into its own nourishment by burning it. Tang San remained calm and composed. He hid a bit of his divine consciousness within his spiritual power, then suddenly injected it into the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron. Immediately, Sky Shatterer started to vibrate intensely. The bit of divine consciousness penetrating its core was equivalent to a foreign entity attempting to take control of it. Naturally, it resisted, and intense flames erupted instantly. A strange scene appeared. As the flames burst out, they transformed into 7 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple, flickering continuously. With each change in color, the temperature increased a bit, madly burning in an attempt to incinerate Tang San's divine consciousness. If this had happened before his divine consciousness evolved under the influence of the Sea God's trident, Tang San would have struggled to withstand it. But now, his divine consciousness was different. It had been imbued with a touch of God King level aura. No matter how the flames burned, Tang San's divine consciousness remained unmoved. On the other hand, the piece of Heavenly Fire Essence Iron began to change in size under the intense burning. Impurities turned to ash, and the fiery 7-colored flames kept changing. Tang San sensed the fluctuations of the flames. His divine consciousness was affected, but under the scorching of these 7-colored flames, that bit of divine consciousness became increasingly brighter, felt as if it was being purified. Previously, only his spiritual power could be purified, due to his insufficient cultivation. Now, even his divine consciousness felt this purification. Instead of being alarmed, Tang San was delighted and immediately injected more of his divine consciousness into the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron, allowing it to continue burning. The volume of his divine consciousness shrank, but it became increasingly bright and dazzling. At the same time, the 7-colored flames of the Heavenly Fire Essence Iron, fueled by the burning of his divine consciousness, also grew hotter and more radiant outside the cave. The Crimson Fox girls noticed faint 7-colored light flowing inside, as if some precious treasure was emitting its brilliance within. They dared not be negligent and guarded the entrance nervously. Tang San didn't know how much time had passed when he felt that his divine consciousness was no longer being purified. Only then did he slowly retract his divine consciousness. The volume of his divine consciousness had shrunk by a third, but it felt much purer and stronger. As it entered his spirit core, he could clearly feel that the process by which spiritual power was automatically absorbed, filtered, and transformed into divine consciousness was also somewhat faster. If Tang San wished, he could now initiate the tribulation with his divine consciousness. Of course, that was impossible. When he used the sea god's power that day, it caused the plane to reject him. Attempting the tribulation now would be courting death. In fact, there were very few places on the demon continent truly suitable for his tribulation. The refinement of his divine consciousness was naturally beneficial to Tang San. Although its volume was now much smaller than when he was in the ancestral court, the overall energy of his divine consciousness had returned to its original state, and its purified state was even better than before. Light flickered in Tang San's eyes, faintly revealing a hint of the grandeur he once had in the god realm. The brilliance gradually dimmed, and his eyes returned to their clear state. His divine consciousness converged inside his spirit core, and with a single thought, he completely concealed his divine consciousness within. Then Tang San silently sensed his bloodline imprints. All of them seemed to have been affected to some extent. Even the yin-yang vortex seemed to have been influenced by the strange flames of the heavenly fire essence iron, becoming less volatile. The calmest imprint was the one occupied by Crystalline, who had been dormant all along. Even when Tang San perished, she remained dormant in his body, not showing any reaction. Tang San had actually hoped that if Crystalline truly had any connection with the Crystal Demon Emperor, it would leave his body due to his death, thus resolving the hidden danger. But throughout, this crystal imprint showed no change, as if it hadn't sensed anything. After making sure his divine consciousness was well and truly hidden, Tang San finally looked at the heavenly fire essence iron, which had undergone a tremendous transformation. The original sky shatterer had disappeared, and what remained was a mass of 7-colored liquid. Yes, liquid. At this moment, the heavenly fire essence iron had turned into a puddle of 7-colored metallic liquid, quietly flowing on the ground. Where it passed, it did not burn the ground, but 7-colored flames rose from it, looking very strange. With a thought, the heavenly fire essence iron, or rather the rainbow skyfire liquid, as Tang San called it, leapt up from the ground and floated toward him. Tang San extended his right hand, and the mass of metallic liquid, slightly larger than a fist, landed in his palm. It didn't feel hot, only somewhat warm, but as the 7 colors rippled, he could still sense the tremendous heat within. This wasn't a simple cup of molten metal, but a mixture of flames. There was fierceness, profundity, and wildness, but also calmness and purity. The strange thing was that the 7 different attributes blended perfectly, creating this unusual transformation. Tang San's hand moved slightly, and immediately, the 7-colored liquid spread across his hand, forming something like a glove. Tang San touched the black crow stone beside him, and the stone began to melt upon contact. Tang San withdrew his hand, unable to help but marvel. This flame was no mundane flame. It was true divine fire. No one on this plane recognized it, but in Tang San's previous divine realm, the fire god, one of the 7 elemental gods, had his divine weapon forged from this material. And this incredibly rare material existed on this very Phelan planet. Even as it was now, this mass of 7-colored liquid was already comparable to the divine artifacts of this plane. And things could get better. Although heavenly fire essence iron was rare on the demon continent, it wasn't unique, as evidenced by the reactions to its appearance at the auction. This meant Tang San might be able to acquire more heavenly fire essence iron. If he continued refining it into this rainbow skyfire liquid, he had no idea what its future potential might be. This liquid had been infused with his divine consciousness, and could be easily controlled with his spiritual power, like an extension of his will. Interesting. Tang San's lips curved into a smile as he placed his right hand on the black crow stone. The refinement of black gold was a very complex process. Even with an amazing tool like Sky Shatterer, it required constant hammering, using the high temperature of the flames and the force of the hammer to remove impurities. This was especially the case with such a large piece of black crow stone, whose quality was much higher than that of normal black crow stone, making the refinement process even more difficult. But at this moment, all Tang San did was place his right hand on the black crow stone. The rainbow skyfire liquid quietly flowed, infiltrating the surface of the black crow stone, which then began to undergo a transformation, melting just like the heavenly fire essence iron had melted before. Under the influence of the rainbow skyfire liquid, the entire piece of black crow stone turned to liquid. The impurities naturally disintegrated and disappeared during the melting process, leaving only the black gold within. The black gold was also liquefied, of course, and it flowed on the ground, but the heavenly fire liquid restricted it, preventing it from flowing away or burning the ground. This method of purification was much easier than hammering and seemed to be more effective. The terrifyingly high temperature of the rainbow skyfire liquid directly turned the black crow stone into the purest black gold. Next, shaping became much easier. Tang San used Lion Tiger Golden Force in combination with the rainbow skyfire liquid to mold the refined black gold into the desired shape. He then absorbed the rainbow skyfire liquid back into his body and started putting together the pieces of black gold. Due to the rainbow skyfire liquid's refinement, the quality of this black gold was extremely high. More importantly, it also contained a trace of Tang San's spiritual power, making every piece of metal feel like a part of his body, allowing him to sense its every subtle change. This was the power of the rainbow skyfire liquid. The metal it purified had spiritual power conductivity by default. The ultimate goal in metal refinement was to endow it with life, transforming it into an actual living entity. The metal refined by the rainbow skyfire liquid also had this vital activity, and it was thanks to a trace of Tang San's spiritual power, making its life an extension of Tang San's will. As he watched the massive finished product take shape, a faint smile appeared on Tang San's lips. He then began to inscribe arrays on it. With the rainbow skyfire liquid, this process became extremely easy. The originally complex arrays were completed in a very short time under the control of his will. Finally, a giant crossbow, or rather a ballista, 4 meters wide and 3 meters long, appeared in front of Tang San, emitting a dark, golden luster. Additionally, there were 3 bolts beside it. One heavy crossbow with 3 bolts. Let's give you a name. What should it be? Tang San's lips curved upward into a sneaky smile. Let's call it the God-hunting crossbow. Looking at the finished product, he was very satisfied. He deactivated the isolation arrays he had previously set up and called out, "Red One, you all can come in now." "Yes, Master." The Crimson Fox girls, led by Red One, filed in. The intense heat had already dissipated. When they saw the heavy crossbow on the ground, they couldn't help but show looks of surprise. Red One looked at the God-hunting crossbow and then at Tang San. "Master, what is this?" "It's called the God-hunting crossbow, and I made it specifically for you. The bloodline of the Crimson Fox gives you the ability to create illusions. Whether you're dodging or fleeing, you have decent abilities. The downside is that you don't really have any offensive power. This God-hunting crossbow, in terms of sheer attack power, is very much a divine weapon. Although it only has 3 bolts, I've imbued each with different abilities. Each use requires me to recharge them, but with your current cultivation, 3 God-level attacks should be enough. Can we use it?" Red One asked, looking at Tang San in surprise. "One person can't use it alone, but combining the power of all 18 of you, it's possible. I've arranged 6 points on the God-hunting crossbow for energy infusion. Form groups of 3 and inject your power into it to draw and shoot the crossbow. Even without the 3 bolts, the crossbow itself can generate an energy arrow with considerable attack power. Next, you must practice how to use it properly." The Crimson Fox girls looked at each other, their pretty faces showing excitement. All along, despite their hard work, their cultivation had been slow due to their limited talents. They were sincerely grateful to Tang San. Without him, they didn't know what state they'd be in now. But they knew their abilities weren't enough to help their master. Now that they had such an opportunity, how could they not be thrilled? Red One said, "Master, rest assured, we will practice diligently." Tang San nodded slightly. "I'll now teach you how to use it. You will be responsible for these 3 bolts. Don't use them unless it's critical. The energy arrows generated by the crossbow should be enough for all practical purposes." With that, Tang San began instructing the Crimson Fox girls on using the God-hunting crossbow. With the rainbow skyfire liquid, Tang San could make this sacred weapon extremely versatile. He could easily improve it in the future, adjusting it based on the girls' cultivation progress and making it even stronger. During the training of the Crimson Fox girls, Tang San made some adjustments to the God-hunting crossbow, making it more suitable for their current cultivation level. These girls were Tang San's loyal followers. And with the God-hunting crossbow, they finally had combat capabilities and could contribute to his goals. With the girls off to practice, Tang San's next goal naturally shifted to the refinement of the space-time beacon. Compared to the heavenly fire essence iron and black crowstone, working with the space-time beacon was far more challenging. It inherently had a powerful slowing effect, constantly affecting everything around it. Making it recognize a master and become a weapon he could control was as difficult as summoning the sea god's trident to his side. With the rainbow skyfire liquid, the process became somewhat easier. Simply using his divine consciousness to penetrate the space-time beacon would make Tang San's thoughts sluggish due to its influence. By enveloping the space-time beacon with rainbow skyfire liquid, he used the extreme temperature of its flames to distort the space-time beacon's power in order to gradually infuse his divine consciousness into it. This way, his divine consciousness wouldn't be affected too much, and the speed of the infusion would be greatly increased. Even so, completely refining the space-time beacon and crafting it into the desired sacred weapon wasn't something that could be done quickly. It would take time and effort. Of course, if the rainbow skyfire liquid could be strengthened to accommodate more of his divine consciousness and better purify it, the time required to refine the space-time beacon would be reduced. Therefore, when he returned to Kali City, Tang San planned to have the Peacock Demon Clan help him purchase a large quantity of heavenly fire essence iron. After completing the refinement of these 3 treasures, the next step was to enhance himself. According to Tang San's plan, the transcendent bloodline that could be produced from the fusion of the yin and yang energies was his key focus. But in order to truly fuse them and combine them with the Blue-Silver Emperor, his body needed to be strong enough to withstand it. Thus, his top priority was to enhance his physical constitution. Although he had improved by absorbing the Wind Dragon bloodline, it was still far from enough, and during his time at the ancestral court, he hadn't had the time to further enhance himself. Merging the Golden Mammoth bloodline and the Behemoth bloodline into his energy vortex was the most crucial task. He also wanted to combine the two, which was even more challenging. However, if he succeeded, he was quite certain that he would attain a physique far beyond anyone below godhood. He now had 7 bloodline imprints: Discerning Eye of Heaven, Peacock Demon, Lion Tiger, Dragon Rock, Chrono Croc, Blue Silver Emperor, and Crystalline. At his 9th order cultivation, he still had 2 empty slots. At this point, the benefit of having empty bloodline imprint slots became evident. After careful consideration, Tang San decided not to use a single imprint to integrate both bloodlines simultaneously, as the difficulty was too great. The risks and uncertainties of directly merging 2 first-tier bloodlines were beyond his control. However, if he first integrated them into 2 separate imprint slots and brought them under control, it would be much easier. Moreover, after the separate fusion, his physical strength would undergo an enhancement. Then when he merged the 2 imprints, regardless of which one devoured the other, it would become easier as his body's endurance increased. After instructing the red one and the others to cultivate diligently, Tang San secluded himself in a cave to begin his closed-door cultivation. This would be his last enhancement of his physical strength before breaking through to godhood. He first chose to fuse with the Golden Mammoth bloodline. The Golden Mammoth focused on defense. Compared to the Behemoth bloodline, it was less violent, making the fusion relatively easier. After making sure his body was in optimal state, Tang San activated the 2 long-dormant imprints. There was no doubt that these 2 bloodline imprints were at the peak of the 9th order. As first-tier bloodlines, although they had resided within Tang San for a long time, they had not diminished in the slightest, which demonstrated the incredible difference that bloodline tier made. Under Tang San's guidance, the Golden Mammoth imprint slowly merged into one empty space. With his powerful spiritual power, Tang San began to suppress and slowly integrate it. Affected by the new imprint, the already existing bloodline imprints immediately lit up one by one. The Discerning Eye of Heaven almost instantly radiated dazzling brilliance, as if declaring its sovereignty. Next was the Lion Tiger transformation. Infused with the God-killing domain, it exuded an imposing aura, creating a sense of mutually increased brilliance with the Discerning Eye of Heaven imprint. The Peacock transformation imprint flickered with silver light, unpredictable and seemingly ready to attack at any moment. The Dragon Rock imprint was relatively more gentle, emitting a faint golden glow. The Chrono Croc imprint was quiet and still, with only a faint halo flickering with twisted light patterns. After all, it was a second-tier bloodline. Sensing the aura of first-tier bloodlines, it did not have much intention to compete. Crystalline's imprint was the only one that did not change at all, remaining quietly in its usual position on the surface of the Blue-Silver Emperor imprint. Yin-Yang energy swirled, reacting to the approaching Golden Mammoth imprint. The Yin-Yang energy fluctuated, seemingly threatening the newcomer not to interfere with it. The Golden Mammoth imprint was gentler than Tang San had imagined. As it merged into the imprint space, a sense of weightiness immediately changed Tang San's perception. He felt as if he had suddenly become much heavier. A soft golden-brownish halo expanded outward, and the imprint did not compete with the others for position. Instead, it settled into place, integrating with Tang San's energy vortex and transmitting its power throughout Tang San's body. This feeling was quite comfortable, heavy and solid. Tang San could clearly feel his entire body being nourished by this bloodline power, with every part of his body undergoing changes. His overall internal energy was steadily increasing, forcing him to focus on compressing it in order to avoid breaking through. But he knew that no matter how much he compressed, once he fully absorbed both the Golden Mammoth and the Behemoth imprints, his cultivation would reach the absolute peak of the ninth order. Forget about compressing his energy and cultivating more. If he could avoid the tribulation for a while longer, he could already count himself lucky. The integration of the Golden Mammoth imprint took an entire day. After the fusion, Tang San's physique underwent some changes, and his muscles were now bulging slightly, making him appear more robust. As his body fully digested the Golden Mammoth imprint, it continued to change. A faint golden glow flickered on his skin, making him tougher from the inside out. The Golden Mammoth was an Earth attribute clan, and they could even control gravity to some extent, apart from their exceptionally strong defense. With this imprint, Tang San could be considered thick-skinned in the literal sense as well. After the fusion, Tang San did not rush to the next step but spent 3 whole days stabilizing. Then he began to integrate the Behemoth imprint. Compared to the heavy solidity of the Golden Mammoth imprint, the moment the Behemoth imprint emerged, it was filled with a dominant aura. The dark golden halo almost immediately tried to fill the entire Dantian, rampaging with unstoppable might. Fortunately, Tang San had first fused with the Golden Mammoth imprint, which greatly enhanced his defense, preventing a violent impact. Stimulated by this violent behavior, the other major imprints instantly reacted. The Polar Luck domain bloomed almost immediately, followed by the God-killing domain, forcibly suppressing the Behemoth imprint. Yet the Behemoth imprint showed no fear, directly clashing with them and launching powerful attacks repeatedly. The Behemoth imprint was incredibly tough. It immediately surpassed the Golden Mammoth, Blue Silver Emperor, and Chrono Croc imprints, pushing aside the Peacock transformation to take the third position. When it faced the Lion Tiger transformation with the God-killing domain, it was finally suppressed. Yet it remained unwilling to submit, relentlessly striving to reach the top, its momentum growing even fiercer. This was beyond Tang San's expectations. He hadn't anticipated the Behemoth to be this violent. At this point, if left unchecked, it would require time to constantly grind down, with the more powerful Discerning Eye of Heaven and Lion Tiger transformation forcibly subduing it. But at that moment, Tang San had a sudden inspiration. Without hesitation, he directly activated the Golden Mammoth imprint, letting the heavy Golden Mammoth imprint merge into the Behemoth imprint. As soon as the two imprints made contact, the Behemoth imprint did not resist but became extremely excited, crazily absorbing the Golden Mammoth imprint's power, thereby strengthening itself and continuing its upward charge. Sure enough, with the addition of the Golden Mammoth, the power of the Behemoth imprint greatly increased. It forcefully broke through the God-killing domain and took the Lion Tiger transformation's position. Then it charged toward the Discerning Eye of Heaven. The Discerning Eye of Heaven remained unmoved. It could not be more different from the Behemoth imprint. One focused on the spiritual aspect, while the other on the physical aspect. The Polar Luck domain showcased its immense power at this time. Every time the Behemoth imprint launched a fierce attack, various issues would arise. The imprint's energy flow would be disturbed, or the merger with the Golden Mammoth imprint just so happened to go wrong. These problems prevented it from breaking through the resistance of the Discerning Eye of Heaven. It truly lived up to its reputation as the stabilizing force of Tang San's Dantian. Tang San was in high spirits at this moment. He clearly felt that as the Behemoth's competitive nature surged upward, it actually did not reject the power of the Golden Mammoth. Meanwhile, the Golden Mammoth imprint simply allowed itself to be absorbed. As they combined, their power continuously increased, but the Behemoth's aggressiveness was gradually stabilized by the Golden Mammoth's solidity. The two imprints merged surprisingly harmoniously. This was vastly different from Tang San's earlier expectations of conflict. Although this was influenced by the suppression from other imprints, it also indicated that the Behemoth and Golden Mammoth bloodlines had some common ground, and that was what led to such a smooth fusion. As they merged, Tang San felt his body swell. It was as if his blood was boiling and all his imprints were being affected. His body felt as if it was being repeatedly washed by the terrifying bloodline power, continuously forged and becoming more solid. Time passed by second, and Tang San entered a meditative state. The harmonious integration of the two imprints was the best-case scenario for him. Continuing, he would undoubtedly gain an incredibly powerful bloodline imprint, maybe even a transcendent one, while significantly enhancing his physical strength. This would compensate for some of his weaknesses and pave the way for his future breakthrough to godhood. With a powerful body, Merging with the even stronger yin-yang energy would naturally become easier. Just when Tang San thought everything would remain stable, a sudden change occurred as the fusion of the behemoth and golden mammoth imprints gradually stabilized, reducing their impact on the discerning eye of heaven imprint. A bright golden light suddenly ignited within the already over 90% fused imprint without any warning. And in the next instant, Tang San saw that golden light surge upward, soaring straight toward his sea of consciousness. As the golden light passed through, Tang San felt as if his entire being was being pierced. An extremely terrifying power had suddenly erupted, seemingly about to shatter his sea of consciousness. At this critical moment, the rainbow skyfire liquid hidden within his sea of consciousness surged out, attempting to block the rush of golden light. Meanwhile, the pores all over Tang San's body began to emit golden light. The golden light struck the rainbow skyfire liquid, which slightly eased the pressure, but the defense formed by the rainbow skyfire liquid was pierced in the next instant. A terrifying aura filled with unyielding will suddenly erupted, causing Tang San's sea of consciousness to expand instantly. The intense pain made him feel as if his sea of consciousness was swelling up like a balloon, at an incredibly high rate. Tang San had no idea why this was happening. It was his first time encountering such changes during imprint fusion. It was also his first attempt to fuse two first-tier imprints together, so maybe this was a natural consequence, but he had no way of knowing whether that was the case. At this moment he had no time to think. If his sea of consciousness ruptured, everything would be over. Moreover, he could faintly sense that tribulation clouds were forming outside Golden Valley. If he couldn't suppress this power, not only would his sea of consciousness be destroyed, but he would also have to endure the baptism of the lightning tribulation right here and now. At the critical moment, Tang San couldn't afford to worry about the consumption of his divine consciousness. At the very center of his spirit core, a golden light suddenly lit up, exuding an aura of immense majesty that filled his sea of consciousness. At this moment, the entire Golden Valley trembled slightly. The immense pressure from the sky caused the Crimson Fox girls to pale, and the members of the Lion Tiger clan rushed out from their homes, looking up at the sky. The golden tree, now not just sentient but perfectly intelligent after merging with the spirit essence, immediately sensed that something was going on far beyond its control. The terrifying pressure evoked an indescribable sense of fear within it. Is the sky falling? A member of the Lion Tiger clan couldn't help but ask. But at that moment, from the direction of the cave, a titanic aura suddenly emerged. Its overwhelming majesty made the Lion Tiger clan members and the Crimson Fox girls prostrate on the ground instinctively, feeling both awestruck and compelled to worship that existence. With the emergence of this majestic aura, the pressure from the sky abruptly dissipated. It was as if the entire Golden Valley was suddenly enveloped by a magical barrier, completely isolating it from the outside world. In front of Tang San, a golden light flickered faintly. A golden trident-shaped mark also appeared faintly on his forehead. The golden light that had rushed into his mind was suppressed by the sea god's trident's aura, preventing it from breaking into Tang San's sea of consciousness. Though it continued to clash violently, it was repeatedly suppressed by the sea god's trident. Tang San activated his divine consciousness, using the supreme aura of the sea god's trident to forcibly push the golden light back toward the bloodline imprint in his dantian. Within the dantian, the imprint initially in the second position had now surpassed the discerning eye of heaven. Even the polar luck domain retracted when the golden light erupted, no longer daring to compete with it. As the golden light was pushed back, the imprint expanded to double its size. It was now at least 3 times larger than the other imprints. The brilliant golden light illuminated every corner of the dantian. Even the always sleeping crystalline now emitted a dazzling light. Tang San felt as if his entire body was about to shatter. If not for his strong will, he might have already collapsed. His body seemed to be in a constant state of breaking down and reassembling. The dazzling golden light was rapidly infusing every cell of his body. At this moment, all Tang San could do was use the overwhelming pressure of the sea god's trident to forcibly suppress the golden light, preventing its power from destroying everything around it. A bizarre scene unfolded. Accompanied by intense pain, Tang San's body seemed to be breaking apart and reassembling itself. His bones, meridians, and internal organs were all coated with a layer of gold, undergoing subtle changes under its influence. As a former god king, Tang San understood that this was a mutation caused by the new fused imprint. The energy of the imprint was so powerful that it was dramatically affecting and changing his body from its very core. The intense pain gradually turned into a tingling sensation. The golden light flowed through his entire body, even tinting the other imprints with gold. He felt that the other imprints seemed to have strengthened slightly. Those not originally at the 9th order were slowly evolving in that direction, including the ever-so-difficult to cultivate discerning eye of heaven. As the crisis gradually subsided, Tang San finally had time to think. He vaguely understood what was happening. Whether it was the Golden Mammoth bloodline or the Behemoth bloodline, both were among the most powerful first-tier bloodlines on the Demon Continent, both legacies of the Demon Emperors, both standing at the pinnacle of this plane's power. Using the energy of the mysterious heaven technique, he had forcibly merged these two powerful forces. And since they complemented each other to a certain level, their fusion continuously produced quantitative and qualitative changes. When these changes reached a certain level, the upper limit of what the bloodline power on this plane could achieve, Tang San believed a mutation occurred. It was a destructive mutation, or rather, a mutation restricted by the rules of the entire plane. Touching the foundational laws of the plane inevitably led to backlash, which explained this eruption of power. His imprint was simply not allowed to contain so much power. In other words, this plane did not allow for the emergence of more powerful bloodlines. If first-tier bloodlines had an upper limit, then the bloodline power of the Crystal Demon Emperor, the strongest of the current era, likely approached or even touched the hard ceiling. If a bloodline mutation exceeded this limit, it would be suppressed by the plane, causing a fatal backlash. The combination of the Golden Mammoth and Behemoth bloodlines clearly cracked this ceiling. In other words, this fused bloodline imprint was beyond any and all first-tier bloodlines. It was the transcendent bloodline Tang San had previously envisioned, although he'd expected to achieve it through the fusion of the yin and yang energies with the Blue-Silver Emperor. The eruption just now was the inevitable result. This was a law of the plane. Existing within a plane meant being subject to its laws. Unless one reached the level of a demon emperor, capable of countering the laws to some extent, like the celestial fox demon emperor, who subtly guided the plane's fortune to benefit the demons and nymphs, which practically amounted to bending the rules to his advantage. Tang San did not possess such strength, but as a former god king, he had methods befitting a god king. The sea god's trident, as a supreme artifact, existed beyond the energy level of this plane. Therefore, even the plane's backlash could not overcome its aura. And with the immense deterrence of a god king's aura, Tang San forcibly suppressed the bloodline riot and backlash. From the planar laws, there was no doubt that this approach would make the plane reject him even more, making it even harder for him to become a god in the future, and the lightning tribulation he would face would be more terrifying. But at this moment he had no other choice. He had to resolve the immediate problem or face immediate death. Now, under the suppression of the sea god's trident's power, Tang San finally managed to complete the fusion of this imprint. This extreme bloodline power was beginning to show its true might, causing Tang San's body to undergo evolution. Yes, this was evolution in the truest sense. It was not just rebirth and certainly not mere reinforcement, but true evolution. His very existence was now on a different level. The emergence of the transcendent bloodline, combined with Tang San's accumulated foundation, meant that although he had not yet broken through to the 10th order, his body had already reached that level. In fact, becoming a god in the physical aspect involved undergoing evolution through the baptism of the lightning tribulation. Tang San hadn't undergone his tribulation just yet, but the power of the transcendent bloodline was causing a similar transformation. This not only elevated his body's strength to another level, but also caused all his bloodline imprints to evolve as well. He could not have possibly predicted something without personal experience. But now that he did have the personal experience, he found that he had jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire. Namely, after forming this imprint, his cultivation had reached the pinnacle of the 9th order, and he could summon the lightning tribulation at any moment. Sadly, he dared not face the tribulation, but the benefits were undeniable, giving his strength another significant leap. Now, even without using his divine consciousness, Tang San could contend with most demons and nymphs at the 10th order through sheer physical strength alone. The reorganization process took a full 7 days. When all the dark gold gradually faded, the massive golden imprint in Tang San's dantian sat proudly at the center of the energy vortex. Its radiance lit up the entire dantian, making the other bloodline imprints seem like mere satellites. Even the discerning eye of heaven was no exception. Tang San could feel the immense power of his blood and energy at this moment. Even a slight movement of this intense energy made it seem as if the air around him would ignite. The unprecedented feeling of strength flowed through every corner of his body. He had almost reached 2 meters in height, and although his muscles weren't particularly bulky and had rather graceful lines instead, every single movement exuded a titanic aura of pure strength, seemingly ready to erupt at any moment. This reminded him of a first-class god named Titan God he once knew in the divine realm, a god that possessed terrifying, unmatched physical strength. He now understood how that god must have felt. His skin had returned to its normal human appearance, but whenever his energy circulated, a layer of dark golden sheen would immediately cover it. This was his first transcendent bloodline. Before the fusion, Tang San had thought of calling it the Golden Behemoth transformation, the obvious choice given the original components of the imprint. However, that didn't seem quite fitting now. After some thought, he decided to name the imprint Golden Armor transformation. A bloodline beyond the first tier, the pinnacle of physical strength. How far could it ultimately evolve? It unquestionably surpassed the strongest bloodline on this plane. According to Tang San's observations, the rulers of this plane were close to the level of first-class gods in the divine realm. In other words, reaching beyond that would put him at the very pinnacle of first-class gods, perhaps even touching the threshold of a god-king. Moreover, he knew that if he could create more such transcendent bloodlines, his future power could surpass even his past self when he reached the level of a god-king. It had been half a month since their return. Mei Gongzi had mostly stayed behind closed doors. The news of her double championship in the Ancestral Court Elite competition had spread throughout the city, deliberately disseminated by the Peacock Great Demon King. For a time, the leaders of the various clans in Kali City were utterly shocked, and the internal affairs of the Peacock Demon clan were in turmoil. Yet Mei Gongzi seemed completely unaware of everything outside. She quietly stayed in her room, not leaving it once. Looking out the window, Mei Gongzi's eyes were slightly dazed. She had never gotten to see his true face beneath the mask. She could never forget how calm and composed he had been until the end, as if facing death was just a simple, normal thing for him. She reflected on her past distrust and suspicion toward him. Why? Because he was just too good to her. It was inexplicable kindness, and there was so much of it that she felt afraid to accept it. During the time at the Ancestral Court, every day was tense and exciting, with rapid improvements and facing powerful opponents. That intense and exciting life was deeply imprinted in her memory. No matter how strong the enemy was, he was always by her side, protecting her. As long as he was there, her heart was at peace. To make her and her father trust him, he had even pledged a blood oath, and he had no reservations toward her. And that blood-red sword, a trace of a supreme divine artifact, still resided in her spirit core. And it was with his help that she had the rudiments of divine consciousness. And now, even without cultivation, her spiritual power was growing day by day, and her cultivation was inching ever closer to the 10th order. He had given her more than even her own father, yet he was gone just like that. He had promised her that she would see his true face after the tournament, yet even until the end, he never took off his mask. What did he really look like? Big brother, do you know? I miss you so much. I regret so much not making you take off your mask earlier. At least that way I could have imprinted your face in my heart. Her heart ached intensely again, and her eyes became moist once more. At that moment there was a knock on the door. Mei Gongzi took a deep breath, pressed her red lips together and dried off her tears. The door opened and the Peacock Great Demon King, looking radiant and full of life, stepped inside. He looked not at all like someone who had been gravely injured and was on the brink of death. Seeing his daughter's state, the Peacock Great Demon King sighed softly and said, "It's time to move on." Mei Gongzi remained silent, just sitting there quietly. The Peacock Great Demon King sat down opposite her. "I have laid the groundwork with the various clans for you. You know you need to pull yourself together. If he were still here, he would surely want to see you strong and determined. He put in so much effort to help you win the tournament and elevate you to a higher level. The core purpose of your redemption society is to help humans have a better living space, isn't it? That was also his wish, undoubtedly. For this wish you must stand strong." Mei Gongzi gently shook her head. "I'm sorry, father. I can't. Right now I have no other thoughts in my mind. I'm sorry." Her spirit was utterly broken. From childhood to adulthood, she had faced countless cold stares and ridicule within the Peacock Demon clan. Even with her father, she always felt a sense of distance. Her mother treated her well, but her mother always seemed to be burdened with heavy concerns. Yet he was different. That mask was a barrier between them, but beyond that mask, there was nothing but kindness and sincerity. Someone willing to die for her. Just this fact alone had a tremendous impact on Mei Gongzi's heart. Her mind was filled with his image. What could she do in such a situation? After all, she was still a teenage girl. The Peacock Great Demon King sighed and said, "I understand your feelings. But what's done is done, and you must look forward. If you want to do something for him, I will support you. But you must pull yourself together and take on the responsibilities you must bear. The situation at the Ancestral Court is still stable for now. We don't know what exactly happened that day, but at least for now, the Ancestral Court won't take any action against us. You've returned, and as the double champion of the Ancestral Court Elite competition, you have the potential to revitalize the Peacock Demon clan. The Ancestral Court prides itself on fairness, so they won't allow the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor to oppress us like last time. The two most important things you need to do are successfully inherit my throne and prepare for your report to the Ancestral Court. To become the ruler of the main city, this report is crucial. You must gain the support of more than half of the Demon Emperors to secure this position, and give our Peacock Demon clan a chance to rise again. The Peacock Great Demon King spoke tirelessly while Mei Gongzi just sat there, listening silently without any reaction. The Peacock Great Demon King frowned. Time is running out. You need to prepare for your tribulation. Only by reaching the god level can you successfully inherit the throne. How can I be assured that you can face the tribulation in your current state? Mei Gongzi kept her head down, still not speaking. The Peacock Great Demon King stood up and paced back and forth in the room. After a while, he suddenly stopped and said in a deep voice, "Don't you want to avenge him? No matter how much pain you're in, revenge is something you should pursue, right?" Mei Gongzi's body trembled, and she finally raised her head to look at her father, her eyes suddenly flashing with a dazzling light. The enemy was obvious, the Tenebrous Demon Emperor. To avenge him you need power. Our ancestor, the Peacock Demon Emperor, was ranked above the Tenebrous Demon Emperor, and your talent surpasses even hers. If you want to avenge Azura, you must make yourself stronger. Only with great strength can you have the possibility of revenge. First, become an emperor stronger than the Tenebrous Demon Emperor, then find him and kill him like he killed Azura. This is the most important thing you can do for him. After hearing his words, Mei Gongzi took a deep breath. Yes, father. You are right. I must avenge him. The Peacock Great Demon King saw that he had finally stirred her emotions and said solemnly, "The first step you need to take now is to face your tribulation. Before doing that, you need to adjust your state of mind, balance your emotions, and ensure that your physique, bloodline, and spirit are at their peak. You need to undergo your tribulation under the watchful eyes of all our ancestors. Your talent is exceptional, and you've gained the recognition of the Celestial Plume, so your tribulation will undoubtedly be extremely challenging. You must be fully prepared." Mei Gongzi asked solemnly, "What kind of preparation do I need?" The Peacock Great Demon King replied, "First, you need to stabilize your mindset, ensuring that your entire being is in the most stable state possible. Your body and mind must be at their peak. Only then can you face the tribulation in your best condition. After the Ancestral Court Elite competition, your foundation is solid, but even I can't tell how strong your lightning tribulation will be. You need to be fully prepared. I will provide you with elixirs you need to get yourself together. Time is of the essence, you must hurry." Mei Gongzi lowered her head, thought for a moment and said, "I want to go back to Kali Academy for that." "Back to Kali Academy?" The Peacock Great Demon King raised an eyebrow, somewhat surprised.
Mei Gongzi nodded.
"I grew up there. I want to go back. It's the best place for me to get things under control." The Peacock Great Demon King thought for a moment and said, "All right, but the time cannot be too long. You must reach your best state within half a month. Can you do it?" After a few more reminders, the Peacock Great Demon King got up and left. Mei Gongzi's tribulation and succession to the position of clan leader required extensive preparation. Thanks to her championship in the Ancestral Court Elite competition, there were no objections from the other clans in the city. However, internal issues within the clan were more troublesome. After all, Mei Gongzi was not purely of Peacock Demon lineage. She also had human blood, not to mention the blood of the White Tiger Demon Emperor. There were many discordant voices within the clan, questioning why the clan leader focused on grooming Mei Gongzi instead of other offspring. The Peacock Demon clan did have other outstanding members, after all, and they had no other allegiance. Mei Gongzi packed her things briefly and quietly left the ancestral home of the Peacock Demon clan. She wore a white cloak with a hood, hiding her stunning features beneath it. As long as she kept her head slightly lowered, no one could see her face. Silver light flickered, and when she reappeared, she was already at the foot of the mountain where Kali Academy stood. Looking at the steps leading upward, her mind felt a bit dazed. After standing there for several minutes, she finally took a step and slowly began to climb. She had deep feelings for Kali Academy. When she was bullied in the clan as a child, she would run back to the academy. Here at least no one would bully her, and the teachers and classmates treated her well. As she climbed the steps, her mind gradually calmed down. Feeling the fresh air from the plants, for the first time in over half a month, there was a hint of brightness on her delicate face. She realized that her father was right. What she should do in the future was to seek revenge. Using everything that her big brother had taught her, She would become stronger and use the blood of the tenebrous demon emperor as a sacrifice to honor her brother. Love can make you grow, and hatred can do that too. Finally, she arrived at the gates of Kali Academy. The massive doors were as majestic as ever. But her gaze did not turn toward the massive inner yard of the academy. Instead, she looked at the corner beside the gate. Once she had stood there for a long time waiting. And this time, she had returned not to find peace at school but to wait there again. What if he was still alive? He had said that within 3 days of her calling for him, he would definitely come back. He would definitely come to her side. Even when he was at the ancestral court, her call had made him rush back at all costs. So what about now? Would he come back? Would he? Slowly walking to that familiar spot, her hand trembled as she pressed the contact information he had left. Big brother, I'm waiting for you. I'll wait here for you for 3 days. You promised me within 3 days you would come back. You would come to my side. Don't break your promise. You have to keep it. This is your promise to me. As she murmured these words to herself, her face was already covered in tears. She hadn't actually spent much time with him. The longest period was during the recent tournament. But after that short time, an imprint of his masked face was forever in her heart. She still clearly remembered that before her seclusion, he had asked for a cup of milk tea, but she hadn't given it to him. Yet later he had given her his very life. Slowly squatting down, she silently wept under the cloak's cover. Will you come back? Please, will you come back? Time passed by quickly, and all Mei Gongzi wished was that it would slow down, because as long as 3 days hadn't passed, she could still hold on to her hope, that tiny sliver of hope in her heart. But time passes whether we wish it or not. It grew dark, then light again. One day slipped by quietly. It grew dark again, then it was once more light. 2 days were gone. Mei Gongzi had been waiting there the whole time, dazed. Scenes of her time with him flashed through her mind over these 2 days. People truly cherish something once it's lost. That's easy to do. But how many know to cherish it wholeheartedly while they still have it? Mei Gongzi was not exactly sure what feelings she had for Azura. The only thing she was sure of was that he had already planted himself deeply inside her heart. The sky was darkening again, and more than half of the 3rd day had passed. Yet he was not there. Although she clung to that sliver of hope in her heart, he ultimately had not arrived. With each passing second, her hope dwindled, and her heart grew colder. But she would wait until the very end, until the last moment. As hope grew weak, it was replaced by hatred. The less hope there was, the more intense her hatred grew, causing her demeanor to change imperceptibly. If she had been strong enough, he wouldn't have died for her. If not for such a powerful enemy, none of this would have happened. Only by becoming stronger could she avenge him. Cold killing intent swirled in her heart, and the bloodline of the White Tiger Demon Emperor within her was continuously boiling. I'm sorry, miss, it's full of falling leaves here. May I sweep this area? A gentle voice suddenly sounded, jolting Mei Gongzi's mind out of her murderous thoughts. She abruptly raised her head, almost blurting out, Big brother! But when she saw the one in front of her, the hope that had suddenly surged up instantly shattered. He was a tall, broad-shouldered young man with smooth, long sea-blue hair that shimmered with a faint blue glow under the sunset. He was very handsome, and had a gentle smile on his face. He was holding a broom, and she found his face strangely familiar, though she certainly did not recall ever seeing such a person. But Mei Gongzi's expression instantly turned cold, and she said indifferently, There's no need to sweep here. Please allow me, said the young man, still smiling gently. I said there's no need. An uncontrollable surge of killing intent erupted almost instantly. As the killing intent burst forth, Mei Gongzi suddenly realized that an ordinary worker wouldn't be able to withstand it, and she hurriedly suppressed it. As she shook her head, reeling at the thought of accidentally hurting someone innocent, she heard that gentle voice say in a completely unaffected tone, Big Sister Mei, don't you recognize me? Hearing the term Big Sister Mei, Mei Gongzi was stunned for a moment and looked at him again. Her killing intent had already subsided, and he was still smiling as before. The glow of the sunset seemed to outline a golden edge around him. The young man raised his other hand, and a cup appeared in his palm, which he held out to Mei Gongzi. Seeing the cup, one of the cups of tea she knew all too well, Mei Gongzi quivered and she exclaimed in surprise, It's you! His face was indeed somewhat familiar, but his body could not be any more different. Even his hair color was different. Yes, I'm Tang San, he said with a broad smile, revealing his white teeth. When Mei Gongzi came here to call for Azura, he was at the end of the bloodline merging process, but the communicator was in his storage ring. He knew she was there as soon as she sent him a message, So he sped through his cultivation and rushed over as fast as possible. With that said, Azura was dead, and the blood oath was gone. Moreover, his appearance, including his hair color, had changed. She probably wouldn't believe it even if he said outright that he was Azura. Most importantly, the identity of Azura was in the records of the ancestral court and would therefore no longer exist. Azura was gone, and Tang San had returned. Tang San? Are you really Tang San? Mei Gongzi looked at him in surprise, that sense of intimacy gradually returning. And for some reason she herself didn't understand, when she looked at his long blue hair, the feeling of familiarity seemed to increase even more. For a moment, she felt a mix of emotions and even had an impulse to rush into his arms and cry, to vent her inner sorrow. Yes, it's me. Big Sister Mei. I heard you were looking for me. I'm sorry. I was called by the Redemption Academy to go into seclusion for cultivation. As soon as I finished, I came to Kali Academy to wait for you. I'm happy I found you. What's wrong? Tang San asked with a smile. Seeing her sad expression, his heart ached as well. However, Azura could not appear now, and explaining that he was Azura was not appropriate either. The light in Mei Gongzi's eyes dimmed again. I'm waiting for a friend here. Oh. Tang San didn't ask who it was. Of course, he knew the answer all too well. Have you been waiting long? 2.5 days. I'll wait for another half day, Mei Gongzi said. Are you hungry? I'll get you something to eat, Tang San said quickly. Mei Gongzi looked at the teacup in his hand and shook her head slightly. No, thank you. Why has your hair changed color? Did something go wrong with your cultivation? It's a mutation in my bloodline, but I wouldn't call it something gone wrong. In fact, it's a good thing. Seeing the sunny smile on his face, for some reason, the coldness in Mei Gongzi's heart melted a bit. She nodded at him. With that, he turned and left. Watching his departing figure, Mei Gongzi felt an inexplicable sensation. For some reason, after seeing him, the sadness in her heart dissipated somewhat, and even the hope that was slowly turning into hatred shifted back into hope. Just as she felt a bit lost, the person who had walked only a dozen meters away returned. Are you all right? Tang San asked tentatively, looking at Mei Gongzi's somewhat pale face. Mei Gongzi glanced at him and said, Not really, no. Her attitude toward him was clearly cold. He had been missing for such a long time, claiming to be in seclusion, but she had asked Zhang Haoshuan and the man had no news of him. What kind of seclusion was that? I'll wait here with you, Tang San said. Mei Gongzi shook her head at him. No need, you go do your thing. I'll wait here alone. Feeling her cold attitude toward him, Tang San couldn't help but feel a bit amused and helpless at the same time. In spite of the calm temperament of a former god king, he actually felt somewhat aggrieved at this moment. Although he knew it was due to his identity issue, he couldn't help but feel this way. After Mei Gongzi told him to leave, she closed her eyes and stood there quietly, continuing to wait. Seeing her, Tang San felt a pang of heartache and even felt an urge to tell her that he was actually Azura and had always been there. But if he told the truth, it would be even harder to explain. The hardest thing to explain would be why he, at his obviously young age, could possess such abilities and knowledge as Azura, how he could have all that battle experience, how he knew of the Azura sword, and then there was the divine technique mysterious circles of heaven. If he told her that he was actually her husband from a past life, who knew if Mei Gongzi would just beat him up? Her emotions toward him were clearly not fantastic right now. So at this moment Tang San didn't know what to do. In fact, he was even more troubled than while facing the tenebrous demon emperor. So he could only stand there silently watching her. As long as he stayed by her side, he felt at ease. He didn't know how long it had been when Mei Gongzi reopened her eyes, only to find that Tang San was still watching her. When she opened her eyes, he smiled at her.
Mei Gongzi frowned.
Why haven't you left? It's okay, I have nothing special to do today. I'll just stand here with you. How haven't you been fired if you're so lazy? She said irritably. Tang San shrugged. The campus has already been cleaned. It's fine. Mei Gongzi gave him a sideways glance but said nothing more. If he wanted to stand there, so be it. Although she verbally urged him to leave, in reality, ever since he arrived, her inner sorrow had slightly lessened, so maybe she did in fact wish for his company. Time passed by the second, and the sky gradually darkened. The 3 days were almost up. The expression on Mei Gongzi's face began to change. With visible anxiety she could not hide. Her eyes started to redden. Tang San had been watching her all along, so he noticed every slight change in her expression. Seeing this scene, his heart ached. He even felt a bit flustered. What should he do? What exactly should he do? Should he tell her the truth? Could she accept it? The sky darkened further, leaving only a little time until the end of the 3 days. Mei Gongzi shivered slightly, and felt that in the night breeze, there was a hint of desolation. Her delicate face turned even paler, her red lips tightly pressed together as she kept gently tapping the communicator that Azura had left her. Tears welled up in her eyes, quivering with her long eyelashes as if they were about to fall at any moment. Tang San took a deep breath. Screw rational thinking. He stepped forward and grasped Mei Gongzi's shoulders. Caught off guard in immense grief, Mei Gongzi was momentarily stunned. Then her surprise quickly turned to anger. "What are you doing?" She raised her hand and struck Tang San's chest. Mei Gongzi's hand landed square. Yet to her shock, Tang San remained completely unmoved. Although she hadn't used much force, she was still at the peak of the Ninth Order, the absolute champion of the Ancestral Court Elite competition. How was this possible? Little Mei, calm down. Listen to me, Tang San said, and Mei Gongzi's eyes widened. His voice now sounded very different from his usual voice. It was the voice of Azura. Mei Gongzi shivered violently. Her eyes were filled with disbelief as she looked at him, and for a moment, her entire mind went blank. Tang San let out a bitter smile. All his rationality, plans, and worries were cast aside at this moment. He simply didn't want her to fall into such despair. No matter how difficult it was to explain, he had to tell her everything. He could no longer keep it hidden, not at the cost of her suffering. He had even felt her bloodline fluctuating due to her unstable emotions. How could she face a divine tribulation in such a state? Mei Gongzi stared at him blankly, her pupils dilating. Tang San smiled bitterly and said, "Yes, Azura is Tang San and Tang San is Azura. Azura didn't die and Tang San never went missing. One way or another, I've always been by your side." You. Mei Gongzi's red lips stopped trembling, but her eyes widened as she stared at him, unable to process all of this at once. Tang San said, "Let me prove my identity first, then we'll talk." As he spoke, he released her shoulder, took her hand, and slowly drew a graceful and natural arc in the air. The familiar feeling, the familiar motion that seemingly contained the profound rhythm of the universe, turning all surrounding energy fluctuations into a perfect circle. It was the divine technique only the two of them knew. Mysterious circles of heaven. Mei Gongzi stared blankly at him and said, "The mysterious circles of heaven." Tang San nodded, released her hand, and his body began to glow. The Lion-Tiger golden force ignited, exuding a domineering aura. Lion-Tiger transformation. Then, silver light flashed around him, and he teleported a meter away. Peacock transformation. Then a pair of golden wings unfolded behind him, covered with fine golden scales. Dragon rock transformation. His blue hair fluttered, and the surging energy of his bloodline burst forth, revealing his peak Ninth Order cultivation without reservation to Mei Gongzi. "No, that's not right. My big brother Azura is dead, he's gone. Even the blood oath has disappeared. You're lying to me, aren't you?" Mei Gongzi looked at him, trembling continuously. Tang San smiled bitterly and said, "Well, you're not wrong. The blood oath disappeared because I did in fact die, at least for a moment. Without dying, how could I have deceived the tenebrous demon emperor? I used divine consciousness to trigger some special abilities to intimidate him, but doing that required a huge cost, almost exhausting my divine consciousness. Fortunately, we obtained a couple of divine items during the tournament. Remember the piece of amethyst I asked you to choose? It has a very important effect, to nurture divine consciousness. This is why gods crave amethystine coins and use them for cultivation. That huge amethyst stone was extremely beneficial for my divine consciousness. Before my full power outburst, I left a bit of divine consciousness in the amethyst stone. I temporarily preserved my body in a disconnected space-time node using another divine item I had obtained earlier, and I made the tenebrous demon emperor believe that I was completely obliterated, as would have been normal. After the incident when the tenebrous demon emperor left, my body was returned to this space-time, and thanks to the amethyst stone, my divine consciousness was brought back to my body, reviving me. The nurturing of the amethyst stone restored much of my power. The reason I didn't come back earlier was that I was healing my injuries. The blood oath disappeared because at that moment, I was as good as dead. The oath lost its foundation and naturally ceased to exist. Mei Gongzi's eyes were still dazed because she simply couldn't reconcile the person in front of her with the other one. In her perception, they were completely different people. However, Tang San's abilities and the things he spoke about were only known to her and Azura. He had even mentioned the tenebrous demon emperor's pursuit and how he had escaped it. Although his explanation was rather profound, it did make sense if she thought about it rationally. But was she rational now? Clearly not. Tang San said, I know it's hard to believe, so I didn't say anything when I first saw you because there are some things I honestly don't even know how to explain to you. Now you should understand why I always wore a mask and told you that I was afraid seeing my true face would impact your mindset in the competition. Yes, because Azura is Tang-san and Tang-san is Azura. I originally planned to stay by your side with my true identity after Azura left, to continue helping you. But seeing you so deep in despair, I just couldn't bear it. I can't let you be this sad, so even though you will surely have countless doubts about me, I still have to tell you the truth. As you wish, I have taken off my mask. Look at me. Tang-san is Azura? Azura is Tang-san.
Mei Hongxi murmured.
Tang-san said, ask whatever you want, and I'll tell you everything I can. You initially couldn't accept Azura because I wore a mask and you found it mysterious. I wanted to protect you under another identity for many reasons, like not having to explain why I possess multiple bloodline powers or how I have such extensive experience in so many areas. After all, I'm a few years younger than you. All these things about me are too unbelievable. But under Azura's identity, I didn't have to explain anything. A mysterious Azura is easier to accept than a young Tang-san with many incredible abilities. By this point, Mei Gongzi was no longer sad. No, she could not even think about being sad, or happy, or anything else. Her mind had never been in such chaos. She truly didn't know what to do or how to face Tang-san. I changed my voice and even my physique to hide my true self. But you should have noticed that my companions are still those from Redemption Academy. Mayor Zhang Haoxuan is my master, and he has always been helping me conceal my identity. He told you that Azura could be trusted because he was aware that Azura is Tang-san. Besides you, my master is the only one who knows about my multiple bloodline abilities and why I have them. It's not just the ones you saw earlier. I can also use the Chronocroc transformation and other bloodline abilities. I have a special cultivation technique, and it allows my energy to devour bloodline power and make it my own. With every increase in cultivation order, I am able to absorb one more bloodline. I can even control fortune with the Celestial Fox transformation. Actually, when I started working at Kali Academy, I used that ability to bring myself luck just to see you more often. But why? Even if things are as you say, let's say they are, but why are you so good to me? Why do you always go to such lengths for me? Mei Gongzi asked. She had finally begun to organize her thoughts and immediately grasped the key issue. Tang-san was silent for a moment before he said, what I'm about to tell you may seem unbelievable, but it's the only explanation for the incredible things that have happened to me. Little Mei, do you believe in fate? And do you believe in reincarnation? Mei Gongzi stared at him in shock. Reincarnation? Tang-san nodded. Yes. In your past life, you were my wife. Later, because I failed to protect you, you left me and reincarnated into this plane, becoming Mei Gongzi. In my past life, I had great power, even surpassing the emperors of this plane. To find you again, I gave up everything from my past life and reincarnated with you. The difference between us is that your reincarnation carried only the life imprint from your past life. You've completely forgotten all your past experiences. But since I had some control over my own reincarnation, I retained a bit of my divine consciousness and came to this demon continent with my memories. My sole purpose in coming here was to find you and protect you until one day we can regain our former cultivation and return to our world. Since he had decided to reveal everything, he didn't plan to hold anything back. Whether Mei Gongzi believed him or not, he had to tell her everything. When he saw how much pain Mei Gongzi was in because of Azura, he realized that in this life she already had feelings for him. I am very fortunate, or perhaps blessed by the heavens, to have found you. Do you remember when I first saw you at the milk tea shop? At that moment I felt so happy, so incredibly happy because I had finally found you. I trained desperately, striving to improve my cultivation, but this plane is different from our original one, and the cultivation methods are different too. I had to explore and learn anew. Only this way could I continuously improve myself to better protect you. So whether as Tang-san or Azura, I always wanted to stay by your side because you are the only thing I cherish in this world. Whether it's making a blood oath for you or dying for you, I am willing. I just want to protect you this time. After hearing his words, Mei Gongzi's emotions, which she had barely managed to organize, were once again thrown into chaos. What is all this? Reincarnation? How is that possible? In her understanding, she couldn't comprehend anything Tang-san was saying. But whether it was true or not, if he believed that, then it made perfect sense why Azura was so incredibly kind to her, always striving to do everything for her. After saying these words, Tang-san let out a long sigh. This was something he had always wanted to tell Mei Gongzi, but had never been able to. Now that he had actually said it, he felt relieved. Although he knew it would be hard for Mei Gongzi to believe, He had never expected her to accept it right away in the first place. He just wanted her to accept that Tang San was Azura and not be sad anymore. So you were my husband in a past life?
Mei Hongxi murmured.
Yes. Tang San nodded. Mei Gongzi took 2 steps back. My mind is a bit chaotic, really chaotic. Tang San apologized. I'm sorry, the reason I couldn't explain this to you before is because it's simply too unbelievable. But it is the truth. Your reincarnation is a complete rebirth, and you fully belong to this plane. My rebirth was forced, so after reincarnation, my divine consciousness and past life memories were rejected by this plane, making it very difficult for me to become a god once more. In any case, you don't need to think too much about this now or accept everything I said. Just know that whether it's Tang San or Azura, I will always be by your side to protect you. Right now, you need to get your emotions under control and focus on breaking through to godhood. When you break through, I will be there to protect you. I hope you choose to undergo your tribulation above the sea. It will be the easiest for me to protect you there. Mei Gongzi tilted her head in confusion. Why? Because in my past life I was the sea god. Sea god. Hearing these words, Mei Gongzi's eyes widened. Sea god? When the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor came to Kali City to confront my father, he was scared away by an avatar of the sea god, or at least that's what the phantom claimed. Tang San nodded. Yep, that was me too. That time, I used up the little bit of divine consciousness I had painstakingly recovered, and it was really just to scare him. Actually, this time as well, the Tenebrous Demon Emperor was scared off by yours truly. Otherwise, after he killed me, why do you think he didn't pursue you anymore? Mei Gongzi looked at him, her emotions a tumultuous mix, her feelings now incredibly complex. She didn't even know how to face him anymore. At times, it seemed that anything she might say would be inappropriate. I need some time alone. Let me think things through quietly, okay?
Mei Hongxi murmured.
Of course. But you must promise me to guard your spirit. Don't let your emotions affect your spiritual power. Otherwise, if you suddenly trigger a tribulation, it will be troublesome. Tang San said softly. Yes. Mei Gongzi nodded, then looked up and gazed at him deeply, silver light rising from beneath her feet. In a flash of light, Mei Gongzi teleported away. Watching the place where she disappeared, Tang San couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. He really didn't know if telling her this was good or bad, but the one thing he was sure of was that now she wouldn't be sad anymore. Well, she would be pretty damn confused instead, as expected of someone whose perception of reality was so suddenly overturned. At this point, he could only let her digest it on her own, and he could only wait quietly for the result of her reflection. No matter what, he could only accept it and he would always protect her. However, with such a complicated relationship, the quest toward winning her heart again might have to start over. With the same silver light rising from beneath his feet, Tang San also teleported away, returning to Golden Valley. His cultivation level couldn't be improved any further. He could only slowly work on his divine consciousness. The most important task was refining the space-time beacon, using the Rainbow Skyfire liquid. The first order of business was to make it into something he could make actual use of. Then he had to turn it into a proper divine item, and eventually even a transcendent divine item. One could say that the space-time beacon was his greatest gain in terms of power since coming to this plane. However, because it was inherently so strong, refining it was also correspondingly difficult. Additionally, with the formation of his new transcendent bloodline, although he had suppressed its energy with the sea god's divinity, allowing it to take shape, he had certainly left a deep impression on this plane. This would make reaching godhood even more difficult in the future. He had no choice. There was only one place that could truly allow him to do that. Time passed day by day, and Kali City appeared very calm, no different from usual. However, many great nobles knew that beneath this calm lay something that would have a profound impact on Kali City. The city lord was about to be replaced. Each main city on the demon continent was extremely important, serving as the foundation for a number of demon and nymph clans. Thus, the lords of the main cities were almost all in hereditary positions held by powerful clans. However, the prerequisite for this inheritance was the support of sufficient power, specifically that of an emperor. Kali City was currently the only main city without the support of an emperor. This was also why Kali City had always been looked down upon by the ancestral court. Without an emperor, it had no foundation for emperors. Controlling a main city was key. It was their greatest source of income, which was extremely important not just for them but for the entire race they belonged to. Among the demon races, there were only 2 emperors who had no interest in this aspect. One was the top-ranked omnipotent Crystal Demon Emperor, and the other was the economically impotent Sword Saint Demon Emperor. The Crystal Demon Emperor simply didn't care, because its bloodline was a mutation, and it had no true descendants. Additionally, the dragon race was powerful and controlled a main city anyway, so it had no reason to fight over other cities. Moreover, one reason all emperors feared the Crystal Demon Emperor was that it had no attachments of the sort. If provoked, it could do anything without any hesitation. The Sword Saint Demon Emperor lacking a main city, on the other hand, was due to the peculiarities of the red-crowned crane lineage. These demons focused solely on sword practice, which required utmost concentration. Therefore, they didn't understand management, preferred a simple life, and had unusually low material needs. This was why they didn't bother to occupy a main city, and if they had, it probably wouldn't be managed terribly well. The Peacock Demon clan had once been extremely powerful, and the main city they occupied was not Kali City but a more prosperous and affluent city. However, after the Peacock Demon Emperor passed away without a successor, the Peacock Demon clan's strength diminished significantly, making it difficult to maintain control of that city. The only reason they still had a main city like Kali City was due to the care of the Celestial Fox Demon Emperor. The Celestial Fox's control over fate and the Peacock's ability to peer into the secrets of heaven were related, and they very much did work together. The Celestial Fox Demon Emperor declared that the early death of the Peacock Demon Emperor was largely due to excessive peering into celestial secrets for the sake of the clan. Therefore, the Peacock Demon clan's ancestral home had to be protected. This allowed the Peacock Demon clan to remain the rulers of a main city. However, without an emperor, they had to give up their original prosperous main city and manage the comparatively peripheral Kali City for many years. Now, with the attitude of the newly ascended Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor, many nobles in Kali City understood that the ancestral court would eventually make a move against Kali City. The Phoenix race also had one other emperor and a city, but unlike the Crystal Demon Emperor, the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor very much desired control over a city. Moreover, the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor's lineage and the Peacock Demon clan were natural enemies. Now that it had become an emperor, how could it possibly spare the Peacock Demon clan? Although the Peacock Great Demon King was not weak and even repelled the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor once, an emperor is still an emperor. If he returned with full force, the Peacock Demon clan might not be able to survive. It was hard to say what would become of the Peacock Demon clan then. One had to acknowledge the Peacock Demon clan's talent in management. Despite Kali City being the most remote and secluded main city, it never lacked wealth due to the efforts of the Etherhorn deers and golden deers. This was great for the inhabitants, but at the same time, it only made the city a fatter sheep. Word had spread throughout Kali City that the Peacock Great Demon King's daughter, born of a human mother, had won double championships in the Ancestral Court Elite competition, and might become the next Peacock Demon Emperor. This was obviously not just a rumor. If true, the Peacock Demon clan had hope. The Peacock Great Demon King's announcement that he would pass the position of clan leader to Mei Gongzi in 7 days further confirmed these rumors. Although it was only the position of clan leader for now, not that of city lord, it was clear to everyone that Mei Gongzi was the designated heir of the Peacock Great Demon King in that respect as well. The most troublesome issue now was the internal strife within the Peacock Demon clan. Mei Gongzi's biggest problem was that she was not of pure Peacock Demon blood. She also had human blood. This was looked down upon within the Peacock Demon clan. Although the Peacock Great Demon King was the clan leader, he was not the only Great Demon King in the entire Peacock Demon clan. He was certainly the strongest, but the Peacock Demon clan had deep foundations, with many elders being at the 10th tier and some even above that. The biggest issue facing Kali City was how to get these elders to recognize Mei Gongzi and allow her to become the clan leader. Thus, with the date set, there was no doubt that this would be a fierce internal struggle within the Peacock Demon clan. All the clans under the rule Peacock Demon clan had been keeping a very low profile recently. They had received reminders from the Peacock Great Demon King and were adopting a wait-and-see attitude. Whether Mei Gongzi could inherit the position of clan leader would determine the future direction of Kali City. The specific situation would only become clear on the day of the grand ceremony. "How are you adjusting?" asked the Peacock Great Demon King, looking at Mei Gongzi with concern. Mei Gongzi nodded lightly. "Much better." The Peacock Great Demon King carefully observed his daughter, and was surprised to see that her deep sadness seemed to have genuinely disappeared. He was experienced and knew that for a woman, the first man to enter her heart would have the greatest impact on her. Moreover, that person had died for her, making the emotional impact even more profound. Seeing Mei Gongzi recover so quickly, the Peacock Great Demon King couldn't help but show a look of admiration. "As expected of my daughter, you have the bearing of a great leader. The future looks promising." Mei Gongzi's lips twitched slightly. The bearing of a great leader? I'm not sad anymore because that person isn't dead at all. Thinking of Tang San made her heart clench. She didn't even know how to face him now. Azura wasn't dead, but he had become Tang San, and he claimed to be her predestined husband. Meanwhile, she was just a teenage girl and had never even considered the idea of a husband, much less one from a past life. How could she not feel conflicted? Seeing her emotional change, the Peacock Great Demon King thought she was feeling sad again and quickly said, "Let's not talk about this. The date for you to inherit the position of clan leader is set. Before that, you must undergo your tribulation. This is the most important thing. You know how demons are. Strength is the foundation of everything. If you can beat them up, then even if you want to become the queen of the world, nobody will bat an eye. With your talent and the celestial plume, as long as you can reach godhood, there should be no problem inheriting the position of clan leader. Have you thought about where you want to undergo your tribulation?" Mei Gongzi almost instinctively blurted out, "At sea." The Peacock Great Demon King was stunned. At sea. Mei Gongzi then realized what she just said, and her mind couldn't help but recall what that guy had told her about his past life as the sea god. Yes, at sea. It would be beyond all the clan's expectations, and the open sea offers no cover, making it difficult for them to interfere. By the time they realize I'm undergoing my tribulation on the sea, the tribulation may already be over. The Peacock Great Demon King nodded and said, "That does make sense. If this were before, it would certainly be fine and I would agree. But the problem is, do you remember when that crystal phoenix came, a so-called sea god appeared? That sea god is likely an emperor-level existence in the endless blue sea. The ancestral court actually had some people directly investigate the endless blue sea but found nothing. I'm worried that if you undergo your tribulation at sea and attract that entity, it will be troublesome." Mei Gongzi opened her mouth but didn't know how to explain things to her father. At this moment, she suddenly understood why Tang San had always been with her as Azura. Many things about him were hard to explain. She could only grit her teeth and placate her father for now. "All right, I'll think about it again. I will also protect you if you want to do it in Kali City, but just in case the commotion is too great, you can go to the Kali Mountains and find a secluded place for your tribulation. I will personally guard you."
Mei Gongzi nodded.
Understood. Then you just make sure you're in absolute peak condition. We don't need to decide this just yet. Just in case someone catches wind of where you want to do it. I'll go make some preparations for now. The Peacock Great Demon King was undoubtedly very cautious. It was indeed safest to decide the tribulation location at the last moment. His concern wasn't much about external threats but rather internal strife within the Peacock Demon clan, where many wouldn't want to see Mei Gongzi successfully achieve god level. After sending off her father, Mei Gongzi sat on the sofa and thought for a while. Finally, she pressed the communicator he had left behind. Soon she got a response. Because it was long distance, she could only notify the other party for a meeting but couldn't directly communicate. With a flash of silver light, Mei Gongzi quietly left the residence. She reappeared in a secluded corner of the city, and after 2 more teleportations, she once again arrived at the familiar corner outside Kali Academy. A tall figure was already waiting there, with long blue hair flowing down his back. When Mei Gongzi saw him, she couldn't help but feel a bit lost. Today he was wearing that familiar mask again. The person seemed like a stranger, but that mask was truly familiar. She had wanted to take off that mask countless times but had never succeeded, until the very end. Tang San smiled bitterly. "If you think you can accept it better this way, I'll keep wearing the mask and be Azura. Okay?" Mei Gongzi's eyes showed a complex expression but she still shook her head. "No, you are you. You should take off the mask. It might take some time to accept you as you are now, but I would prefer it that way." "Okay." Tang San lifted his hand and took off the mask, revealing his handsome face. As she looked into his gentle eyes, Mei Gongzi's heart calmed down a bit and she said, "My father told me to choose a place for the tribulation. I suggested the endless blue sea, but he said there might be risks because the sea god appeared there before. What should I do?" Hearing this, Tang San's spirits lifted. She still trusted him. Otherwise, she would never have said something like that to her father. It seemed that even though she couldn't accept the idea of him being her husband from a previous life, at least for now, she believed he was indeed Azura and wouldn't harm her. Tang San said, "This is not difficult to solve. You can tell your father the truth. The sea god actually appeared for your sake. When you were a child, you happened to meet the sea god by the seaside and became his pupil. So when you undergo your tribulation, the sea god will watch over you from the sea, making it the safest place for your tribulation. If necessary, I can stay by your side as the sea god's emissary. I have my ways to make him believe that I can represent the sea god." Listening to his explanation, Mei Gongzi couldn't help but feel a bit dazed. He was a Jura. He really was a Jura. His tone was just like it always had been, as if no matter what the problem was, it could be easily resolved. All right. The tribulation will take place in about 5 days, just before the selection of the clan leader. Then, with the momentum of becoming a god, I will announce my inheritance of the Peacock Demon clan leader position. Okay. Can I stay by your side as the sea god's emissary? Tang San asked. Mei Gongzi glanced at him and eventually nodded. Tang San was overjoyed. That's great. I can only feel at ease by staying by your side. I'll also make some preparations to ensure everything goes smoothly. In the next few days, practice controlling the Holy Blaze Saber more. The Holy Blaze Saber will allow you to summon the sword intent of the Azura Sword, that transcendent divine weapon. When you face tribulation lightning that you feel you cannot endure, you can use the sword intent to handle it. I will be by your side then. But remember, the lightning tribulation is not just a test. It's also an opportunity, a great opportunity. So don't disperse the lightning entirely. Let some of it course through you, even if it hurts at that moment. That baptism of lightning will trigger the transformation from human to divine, and it will be very important for your future. No, I don't want to be hit by lightning and look ugly, Mei Gongzi said, pouting. Tang San was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Hey, I'm asking you to endure the lightning to some extent, not to get hit. You just need to channel some of the lightning's power into your body to stimulate your bloodline. Mei Gongzi was taken aback, and her pretty face reddened. Got it. We'll meet here in 3 days. I'll notify you through the communicator, and then I'll probably take you to meet my father. Be prepared. Tang San nodded. All right, no problem. Right now he was in top shape. He had been trying out his transcendent bloodline, adapting to the improvements and changes it brought to his body. His cultivation seemed to have reached its peak, but his combat power was increasing daily. He was now much more confident than when he first went to the ancestral court. Then I'll be off, Mei Gongzi said. All right, goodbye, big sister Mei, Tang San said with a smile. Hearing him call her big sister Mei, a slight smile finally appeared on Mei Gongzi's face. She nodded and raised her chin proudly, then disappeared in a flash of silver light, teleporting away. After she left, Tang San let out a long breath and clenched his fist in excitement. Although he wasn't sure if the influence of their past lives made Mei Gongzi more accepting of him in this life, her willingness to seek him out and accept his help meant she had essentially acknowledged that Azura was Tang San. From now on, it was just a matter of spending time together. As long as he could stay with her, Tang San felt at ease. He wasn't in a hurry. After all, he had waited so many years and didn't mind waiting a bit longer. He also teleported back to Golden Valley. It had been about 20 days since he returned from the ancestral court, and he had mostly digested his gains. The rainbow skyfire liquid was indeed a good thing, and so was the massive black crowstone he'd refined into black gold. The Crimson Fox girls were still getting used to the god-hunting crossbow he had made from it. But the greatest gain was still the spacetime beacon. Although he was far from being able to use it to its full potential, in the hands of someone like Tang San, it was certainly not being wasted. Although the rainbow skyfire liquid couldn't refine it directly, thanks to its ultra-high temperature and the infiltration of Tang San's divine consciousness, he could gradually change it, shaping it into what he needed. This process was bound to take a very, very long time. The only ways to speed it up were acquiring more rainbow skyfire liquid and improving his divine consciousness. In fact, now that Tang San's divine consciousness had undergone a qualitative change, he could use the spacetime beacon a lot more proficiently. Sadly, the time-slowing effect of the spacetime beacon was just too terrifying. It even impacted the divine consciousness of a god king, and even though he could ignore it to some extent, he couldn't do that continuously. The burning of the rainbow skyfire liquid was also affected by the time lag, but to a much lesser extent. After all, it didn't do anything actively. It only needed to maintain a high temperature. As long as it reached and maintained peak temperature, it would naturally leave marks on the spacetime beacon over time. The transcendent bloodline had brought tremendous changes to Tang San. Since the transcendent bloodline had taken shape, he constantly felt that he was about to face the lightning tribulation. This was not his urge to become a god. Rather, this plane wanted to use the lightning tribulation to destroy him. Fortunately, his divine consciousness was strong enough to suppress his aura, preventing the lightning tribulation from coming. At the same time, all of Tang San's bloodline imprints were constantly evolving under the influence of this transcendent bloodline. They no longer needed to absorb the power of similar bloodlines, and were already advancing toward the peak of the Ninth Order. And once all his bloodline imprints reached that point, he would be unable to prevent himself from undergoing the tribulation. The clock was ticking. The Dragon Rock transformation had already reached the peak of the ninth order, and the Peacock transformation and Lion Tiger transformation were both fairly close to the peak. Meanwhile, the Discerning Eye of Heaven and Chrono Croc transformation were rather slow to advance. The Chrono Croc transformation had just entered the ninth order, but after doing so, its advancement speed slowed considerably. The Celestial Fox bloodline was, of course, different from other bloodlines. Cultivating this power that controlled fate was no easy task. But this was actually good news for Tang San. The fact that these two bloodlines were so slow to evolve meant Tang San had more time until the inevitable tribulation. According to his estimation, he would not face it for at least half a year. Half a year's time was sufficient for preliminary preparations. There was also the question of Crystalline. Tang San had tried several times to call out to Crystalline but received no response. He had no idea how that imprint would impact his breakthrough, and he had no way to find out, so he could only leave it aside for the time being. As for the golden armor transformation, the changes it brought to Tang San were simply beyond measure. For instance, that day when Mei Gongzi pushed him, he didn't even flinch. It wasn't that he was intentionally resisting. It was just that his physique was simply too powerful. Tang San hadn't even fully mastered the golden armor transformation yet, but he roughly estimated that his body weight was 10 times what it used to be. His strength had skyrocketed correspondingly. Now, even without using any bloodline power, just his physical strength and explosive power were enough to overpower most ninth order warriors. The toughness of his body had also reached an astonishing level. Once he activated the golden armor transformation, even a demon king would find it difficult to break through his defense. Only a great demon king could pose a threat to him. This was the power of a transcendent bloodline. In fact, this transcendent bloodline was likely able to support him in cultivating beyond the demon emperor level, at least in theory. Tang San believed that was the reason he faced suppression from the planar laws. And speaking of transcendent bloodlines, Tang San was quite pleased to see the evolution of the Blue-Silver Emperor. Although the yin-yang energy was powerful, its foundation wasn't strong enough. The Blue-Silver Emperor was barely a second-tier bloodline. Stimulated by the golden armor transformation and the surge of vital energy, it was now evolving rapidly, entering the ninth order. At its current pace, it would reach the peak of the ninth order in no more than a month. With his current physical strength, Tang San could afford going to find a proper supplement for the Blue-Silver Emperor. After that, he could start working on his second transcendent bloodline. Once the yin-yang Blue-Silver Emperor was successfully refined, its power would be on another level, perhaps even compared to the golden armor. Then, he would have no weaknesses and could truly aim to break through to God level. For now, the main focus in cultivation was to better master the golden armor transformation. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When Tang San received Mei Gongzi's summons, he immediately arrived outside Kali Academy. Mei Gongzi wore a simple light blue long dress. When she saw him again, her gaze seemed even softer. "Let's go, I'll take you to meet my father. Shall I introduce you as Tang San?" "Right." Tang San nodded. Regarding his identity as both Tang San and Azura, both of them understood without much discussion that they couldn't tell the Peacock Great Demon King. It would be too complicated to explain, so it was better to be seen as a different person. One good thing was that Tang San had changed significantly from when he first came to Kali Academy as Little Sweeper Tang. Even his actual acquaintances might not recognize him now, let alone the Peacock Great Demon King, who was nothing more than a stranger. Mei Gongzi came to Tang San's side and activated her peacock transformation. Her long peacock blue hair mesmerized Tang San. A silver halo enveloped them. In the next moment, space folded, and they disappeared from where they stood. It had been some time since he last fought alongside her, and Tang San could clearly feel that Mei Gongzi's mastery of spatial power had increased again. Her comprehension was truly remarkable. Just as he had been assimilating what he had gained from the ancestral court, Mei Gongzi had been subtly digesting her gains as well. After all, besides her cultivation improvement, Mei Gongzi's practical combat experience, as well as her understanding of and control over space, had made significant leaps during the competition. With a flash of silver light, the two of them appeared in Kali City. Mei Gongzi looked at Tang San with a curious expression. "Hey, why is it so exhausting to teleport you now? You seem to have changed a lot, and I don't mean your hair color." Tang San smiled bitterly. "I've gotten heavier. Do you remember I told you before that I can absorb other bloodlines and turn them into my own power? I actually took the peacock transformation from you back in the day. Sorry about that. Anyway, during the Ancestral Court Elite Tournament, I acquired other bloodlines as well, specifically the Golden Mammoth and Behemoth bloodlines. After I absorbed these two bloodlines, some special changes occurred. I managed to merge them into one, and the result? Well, it's something beyond the first tier, or so I believe. I named it the Golden Armor Transformation. Golden? Wait, what? You can merge different bloodlines. Mei Gongzi looked at him in surprise and didn't hurry to continue teleporting. Tang San nodded and said, based on my experience, any bloodline can merge with another, but the difficulty of the fusion and its effect varies depending on their compatibility. The higher the compatibility, the better the effect, and the greater the chance of a beneficial mutation. The Behemoth and Golden Mammoth bloodlines seemed to be related to some extent, so when they merged, the result was exceptionally powerful. Since both are first-tier bloodlines, I believe I created a super bloodline. Well, I call that a transcendent bloodline. Mei Gongzi's eyes lit up. Oh, is it possible for me to fuse bloodlines? I also have 2 bloodlines. Tang San shook his head and said, I'm afraid not. One reason is that the differences between the Peacock Demon bloodline and the White Tiger bloodline are just too great. They would be extremely difficult to merge, and even if they do merge, the result might not be good. Moreover, if you truly fuse 2 first-tier bloodlines to create a transcendent bloodline, you would likely face oppression and rejection from the entire plane. So unless the Azura sword really comes to your side, you shouldn't attempt this. Oh, Mei Gongzi said, a bit disappointed. So how powerful is your golden armor transformation? Well, as you've noticed, I'm now heavier than before. 10 times heavier, actually. But that's because I don't have full control of this bloodline power yet. Once I become a god myself, I should be able to solve this problem. And speaking of that, the golden armor transformation has given me a tremendous boost in strength and defense, so my physique is pretty much at god level. I believe an ordinary demon king probably wouldn't be my match now. If I encounter someone like Meng Didi again, I could probably just let them hit me, and they still couldn't do much. So strong. Mei Gongzi looked at him in astonishment. Tang San smiled. I need to be strong to protect you, and when I can restore my past life's cultivation, then I'll be truly strong. Unfortunately, it'll be very difficult in this plane because I practically have to go against the entire plane. We'll have to take it step by step and see what happens. This plane is the most powerful non-divine plane I've ever seen. Otherwise, it couldn't accommodate so many Emperor-level beings. I thought your cultivation level would decrease after that clash with the Tenebrous Demon Emperor. I'm happy to see that you're fine, Mei Gongzi said, visibly relieved. Her gaze softened as she looked at Tang San. Tang San said, it's all right. My divine consciousness was somewhat affected, but there were also some benefits. Overall, it was worth it. That's good. Let's go. This time Mei Gongzi was prepared. She mobilized more spatial power, and with a flash of silver light, she teleported Tang San directly to her residence in the ancestral house of the Peacock Demon clan. This was Tang San's first time in Mei Gongzi's quarters. It was about 80 square meters, with the living room and bedroom connected. From the window, he could tell that the building was located rather high, seemingly on a mountaintop. Mei Gongzi's room was also high up within the building, allowing a view of the surroundings. The overall structure resembled a castle. The room was elegant and clean, decorated mainly in light blue. Although it wasn't luxurious, it was very cozy, and gave off that faint fragrance unique to her, which made Tang San feel captivated. Mei Gongzi said softly, wait here for a moment. I'll go find my father. With that, she teleported away again. One had to admit, the peacock transformation was indeed very convenient for this. Tang San walked to the window and looked outside. Indeed, it seemed to be a castle. Because of the high elevation, the view outside allowed a clear sight of Kali City, sprawling below. From the positioning, this castle seemed to be on the northern side of Kali City, facing south. Behind it were mountains, and in front of it was the city. The city lord was in a very good position, Tang San had to admit. The owner of this castle, the clan leader of the Peacock Demon clan, could constantly watch over his domain from within the castle. This was power, controlling the lives of others and holding immense wealth. It seemed that any world with life wasn't it the same in his previous world? Before becoming a god king, he fought against those in power in his previous life. So much time had passed that Tang San had almost begun to forget what his old adversaries were like. Compared to his growth in his previous life, this life was more difficult. In both cases, he had to start everything from scratch, but the opponents on this plane were comparatively more powerful. In fact, his current cultivation would have safely placed him close to the very top of the Douluo continent, at least before it evolved into a divine realm. Now that it had evolved, it was definitely on the level of this demon continent. Fortunately, he had already achieved an important milestone. With his current cultivation, the only beings on this plane that could truly threaten his and Mei Gongzi's lives were those at the absolute top, so he felt more at ease. The biggest challenge ahead was how to help Mei Gongzi establish herself in Kali City and truly become its ruler. Only by achieving this could they move further. Then, he would have to deal with the matter of his own cultivation. While Mei Gongzi's ascension to god level would be challenging, it shouldn't be too problematic since she now had the sword intent of the Azura sword protecting her, and he himself would be watching over her. No, the biggest issue was his own ascension. Even now, he had no confidence in it. Now that he had acquired the transcendent bloodline, his energy could not be compressed anymore, and his cultivation slowly increased naturally. In other words, when the time came, he couldn't avoid the breakthrough. All he could do was prepare for it. However, he didn't know how much pressure he would face from this plane during his breakthrough. Although he had decided where to attempt the breakthrough, he still had no confidence. If he could successfully ascend, the qualitative change would make him fearless. Even when facing an emperor, he would have some means of self-protection. Tang San was silently thinking about this when he sensed a change and turned around. He saw that Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Great Demon King had teleported in. The Peacock Great Demon King was dressed in luxurious robes and had a cold expression on his face. When he saw Tang San, a wave of divine consciousness immediately fell upon Tang San, scanning him. Tang San's expression remained unchanged. With a smile, he bowed slightly and said, "Greetings, City Lord. I am Tang San." The Peacock Great Demon King's expression changed, reflecting his inner shock. When his divine consciousness scanned Tang San, he felt as if he was looking at a furnace, a huge furnace, with blazing bloodline power that made him seem like a small sun. Bloodline power was the foundation of the demon and nymph races. This was especially true for the demons, who couldn't alter their bloodlines as readily as nymphs could. The strength of the bloodline they were born with determined their heritage and power. But the power of the bloodline Tang San possessed was simply unheard of. The City Lord was a peak Great Demon King, yet even his bloodline didn't have this kind of blazing intensity. What level of bloodline was this? Before coming, Mei Gongzi had already told him that she knew the sea god's emissary, and the sea god had come to help last time because he acknowledged her. So, she still hoped to undergo her tribulation at the endless blue sea, where interference would be minimal. Seeing Tang San now, the Peacock Great Demon King could barely conceal his inner shock. The young man in front of him possessed the strongest bloodline he had ever encountered, even though his cultivation level seemed not to have reached the Demon King level. But such a bloodline. Tang San, right? Please have a seat. The Peacock Great Demon King gestured for Tang San to sit. As they sat on the living room sofa, the Peacock Great Demon King's divine consciousness remained focused on Tang San. Throughout, the sun-like fluctuations of Tang San's bloodline power continuously shocked him. Could such an existence really be among the sea clans? Tang San, you say you are the sea god's emissary. Do you have any proof? The Peacock Great Demon King asked directly. Despite the sheer power of Tang San's bloodline, which left little room for doubt regarding his status, he still needed further verification. Yes, I represent the sea god's will. As he spoke, a faint golden light flashed in Tang San's eyes, and a golden trident symbol appeared on his forehead. Tang San's entire body seemed to brighten when that symbol appeared, and a fairly weak but clearly discernible pressure fell upon the Peacock Great Demon King. The Peacock Great Demon King's pupils contracted. He could immediately recognize the aura. When the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor came, it was this same aura that descended and eventually scared him off. Otherwise, although the Peacock Great Demon King could have inflicted more severe injuries on the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor, he himself might have perished. "Where is the sea god now?" he asked in a clearly softer voice. "His Majesty is in seclusion in the depths of the endless blue sea. As the ruler of the endless blue sea, he cannot easily leave it. Previously, our clan faced a catastrophe. We survived thanks to His Majesty's intervention. If possible, could you arrange for me to meet him to express our gratitude?" Tang San shook his head. "I'm afraid that's impossible for now. His Majesty's periods of seclusion are very long, and I don't know when he will come out. However, His Majesty has said that as long as Mei Gongzi is in charge of Kali City in the future, the countless sea clans of the Endless Blue Sea will be allies of Kali City." Upon hearing this, the Peacock Great Demon King raised an eyebrow in suspicion. Why would my daughter receive such care from His Majesty? When Mei Gongzi was young, she unintentionally helped His Majesty with a small matter. His Majesty has always been very concerned about her growth. That's why he intervened when the Peacock Demon clan was in trouble. The City Lord can rest assured that our sea clans have no ambitions for the land and no intention of clashing with the ancestral court. But if we're just talking about Kali City, we are willing to be allies. The Peacock Great Demon King's heart stirred. Could we trade in the future? Tang San couldn't help but admire inwardly. No wonder this city was so prosperous and commercially thriving. The Peacock Great Demon King was ready to do business at a moment's notice. Obviously, that was a wise move. The sea held countless treasures, and securing trade rights with the sea clans would indeed greatly benefit Kali City. We will have to see about that in the future. We heard that the city lord intends for Mei Gongzi to inherit the throne. We believe this will mark the beginning of our friendship with your noble clan. His Majesty the Sea God said that if Mei Gongzi undergoes her tribulation, she should go to the endless blue sea. There, His Majesty will personally protect her, ensuring no risks. That would be wonderful. If His Majesty needs anything from the land, just let us know. Actually, now that you mention it, His Majesty does indeed need something. Then Tang San carefully described the appearance of the heavenly fire essence iron. He couldn't produce the Sky Shatterer now, so all he could do was describe it. After listening to his description, the Peacock Great Demon King said, "The metal you described seems to be lava iron, a metal that naturally gives off a very high temperature and it's difficult to handle. It is rather rare. Could you please help His Majesty search for some?" The Peacock Great Demon King said without hesitation, "I can try. However, this metal is quite rare and valuable, so it might take some time. There's no rush. During Mei Gongzi's tribulation, I will stay by her side to protect her." The Peacock Great Demon King nodded. "Thank you. I will arrange a place for you to stay shortly." Tang San wanted to say he could stay here, in Mei Gongzi's quarters, but he was afraid of being kicked out by an enraged peacock demon, so he simply nodded. Lava iron, or rather heavenly fire essence iron, seemed to be among the rarer minerals on this plane. But since he had seen it at the Kali City auction and it wasn't all that highly valued, it was painfully clear that the demon and nymph races on this plane didn't recognize its worth. With the capabilities of the Etherhorn Merchant Association, finding some should not be a big problem. Having more heavenly fire essence iron melted into rainbow skyfire liquid would be immensely beneficial for Tang San. It could not only aid in forging, speeding up the absorption of the spacetime beacon, but also serve as a weapon. Although Tang San didn't have any fire attribute abilities, the rainbow skyfire liquid was no less powerful than a typical divine weapon. Even as it was, ordinary weapons would be nothing but scrap before it. The Peacock Great Demon King subtly interrogated Tang San about the sea god, but since Tang San was the sea god in his previous life, he handled that with ease. The Peacock Great Demon King was actually not worried about whether the sea clans had designs on the land. The demon and nymph races had more than a dozen emperors after all. No matter how strong the sea god was, he could not fight against so many emperors, and how powerful could he be while he was away from the sea? Moreover, the sea god had helped them before, which made him somewhat trustworthy. More importantly, the Peacock Great Demon King himself did not have much time left. In this situation, he had no choice but to trust the other party, even though he could not imagine what an emperor could possibly want from Mei Gongzi. Thus, the location for Mei Gongzi's tribulation was set in the endless blue sea. It would take place the day after tomorrow. Tang San stayed in the Peacock Demon Clan's castle. Since this was his first time there, he was unfamiliar with the place, but he did not wander around. He simply settled in the room arranged by the Peacock Great Demon King, focusing on his cultivation. Mei Gongzi's feelings towards Tang San now were clearly different from before when he was Azura. Although she had initially accepted him, her emotions were still complicated. Especially after hearing Tang San's story about their past life's connection, she carefully recalled the fragmented images she had seen when she first obtained the Azura sword. Although she couldn't see clearly at the time, she had had a clear vision of something else. The three secrets of heaven she'd seen through the celestial plume, and the figure that was beside her. If those vague fragments of memories were indeed about him, then his story might be true. And if it was true, then this person was her reincarnated husband who had come to find her. Before, even when she was with Azura, she'd seen him as the older brother she'd never had. But even before that, when she was with Tang San, she always felt an inexplicable sense of closeness and even affection every time she saw him. Thinking about it now, it could be related to the bond they'd shared in their past life. However, she couldn't remember anything from that past life. She had thought about asking Tang San and listening to his story but ultimately held back. Would knowing everything really be good? She wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps knowing everything wouldn't be particularly good. Besides, she really had other priorities right now. In any case, with this new understanding, her perception of Tang San had subtly changed. She no longer saw him as the older brother Azura was, much less the younger brother Little Sweeper Tang had been. But it was also obviously impossible to see him as a husband now. As a result, while she had access to him at all times, she actively avoided him. She did not know how to deal with this. Tang San wasn't surprised by this at all, nor did he take the initiative to find Mei Gongzi. As long as he was there to protect her, he wasn't in a hurry. Time would prove everything and feelings would develop naturally. He had originally planned to gradually tell her about their past life, once she truly fell in love with him in this life. But the plans of man couldn't keep up with the plans of heaven. He had to tell her to prevent her from doing something extreme while mourning Azura's death. Given the situation, he decided to take things slowly and give Mei Gongzi time to accept everything. 2 days passed by quickly. The information about Mei Gongzi's upcoming tribulation was strictly confidential. In fact, only she and her father truly knew about it. If she underwent the tribulation in the ancestral land of the Peacock Demon clan as usual, the entire clan would discover it immediately, and no one could predict what changes might occur. Therefore, the Peacock Great Demon King had always searched for a tribulation site for Mei Gongzi, preferably far away from the clan, to minimize interference. As long as she successfully underwent the tribulation, there would be a lot less resistance on behalf of her clansmen. Early in the morning, there was a knock on Tang San's door. Tang San woke up from his meditation and opened the door. Mei Gongzi was standing gracefully in front of him in a white dress. He hadn't seen her since the meeting with her father, and seeing her face now, Tang San couldn't help but feel his heart flutter. He blurted out, "You're so beautiful." He wondered if it was due to her changing with age, but Mei Gongzi seemed to look more and more like she had in her previous life, though her aura was slightly different. Mei Gongzi's face reddened slightly. "It's time to get ready to leave. Pack up and I'll call you in a bit." "All right," Tang San nodded. Mei Gongzi turned and left. Tang San washed up, and breakfast was delivered to his room. After eating, she returned. Tang San nodded. Silver light swirled, expanding from under her feet to envelop both of them. In the next moment, they teleported away. The ancient castle of the Peacock Demon clan remained undisturbed. Spatial fluctuations were quite normal here. The spatial fluctuations rippled as Mei Gongzi and Tang San appeared out of thin air in a corner of Kali City. The Peacock Great Demon King was already waiting there, wearing a black cloak with a hood. "Are we heading straight to sea?" he asked Tang San. Tang San nodded and said, "Yes, let's go straight to the sea. Please teleport us to the eastern coast." The Peacock Great Demon King had extremely high cultivation, so having him teleport them there was the most efficient way. The next moment, silver light enveloped them and gone they were. From Kali City to the eastern coast wasn't very far, and after a single teleportation, Tang San and Mei Gongzi could hear the sound of the waves. It was early morning and the tide was receding, leaving many shells and small sea creatures on the salty, fishy-smelling beach. Feeling the sea's aura, Tang San felt instantly revitalized. The endless blue sea was vast, practically boundless, hence the name. It was said that within this endless blue sea, there were several different sea regions, such as the Verdant Sea inhabited by the Green Spirit clan, and the Holy Clear Sea inhabited by the Holy Light clan. However, these clans and races were much weaker compared to the demon and nymph races. Furthermore, their exact locations were unclear. The demons and nymphs had never been all that interested in exploring the sea, as the demon continent concentrated most of the plane's resources and was quite enough to sustain them. Moreover, although there were no emperors in the endless blue sea, at least not from what the ancestral court knew, there were still many powerful sea demons, and it was rather unwise to provoke them. The Peacock Great Demon King had been observing Tang San all along. Upon reaching the seaside, he immediately noticed a change in Tang San's demeanor. The young man appeared much more relaxed and open. This feeling couldn't be faked. It was clear that he had a close connection with the sea. Tang San lightly tapped the ground and pushed himself up, rising in midair. He said to Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Great Demon King, "Please follow me." Then he flew straight toward the open sea. To prevent the Peacock Great Demon King from discovering his identity as Azura, Tang San didn't use the flight ability of his Dragon Rock transformation. Instead, he relied on his incipient control over gravity, an innate ability of the Golden Mammoth clan. His golden armor transformation inherited this ability and greatly enhanced it. Thus, Tang San found it rather easy to fly even without wings. Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Great Demon King spread their peacock wings and soared into the sky, following behind Tang San. Tang San lightly pressed his right hand against his forehead, and immediately, an invisible wave of spiritual power expanded from his spirit core. A strange scene unfolded at once. As his spiritual power expanded outward, the previously turbulent sea instantly calmed down, becoming as still as a lake. It was as if he was at the epicenter of an underwater earthquake, Except it was the exact opposite effect. Rather than causing waves, it was calming them down. This was something not just unseen, but absolutely unheard of by the Peacock Great Demon King and Mei Gongzi. Both of them couldn't help but show expressions of astonishment. Mei Gongzi's confidence in Tang San stemmed from the fact that she knew he was Azura. Azura had exhibited many wonders, and besides, he had already told her that he used to be the sea god in his previous life. Though the scene before her surprised her, it was still within her expectations. However, it was the first time the Peacock Great Demon King had seen an ability that could influence the sea in such a manner. Clearly, no energy was being released. It was merely spiritual power, not even divine consciousness, yet it affected the sea. His divine consciousness could even sense the various sea creatures swimming below the surface. They had all stopped and were now looking up at the surface. Tang San lightly closed his eyes. What he felt was rather different from Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Great Demon King. As his spiritual power expanded, he could clearly feel the response from the sea creatures. Although many of them were very weak, at this moment, their spiritual power converged into a torrent, surrounding Tang San with admiration and affection. This was worship for the sea god's aura. Tang San's level of divine consciousness had increased, which also meant that his spiritual power had become more distinctly infused with the aura of the sea god from his previous life. If not for the suppression of the plane, Tang San would have preferred to achieve his god-level breakthrough over the sea. Such an environment would grant him considerable power. However, he understood that when the time came, the endless blue sea and its myriad beings would not side with him. They submitted to him because of the sea god's aura he carried, but when he conflicted with the planar ruler, they would inevitably stand against him, as they belonged to this plane. Ironically, helping others achieve breakthroughs over the endless blue sea was perfectly fine, but it was unsuitable for his own breakthrough. His spiritual power continued to expand, constantly absorbing the nourishment from the sea creature's spiritual power. Tang San's aura began to expand as well. The Peacock Great Demon King could vaguely see a layer of blue radiance emanating from Tang San that made it seem as if Tang San had merged with the ocean. He really is the emissary of the sea god. To have such control over the sea, there's no other explanation. But in that case, how powerful must the sea god himself be? Amid his astonishment, the Peacock Great Demon King couldn't help but feel a bit of concern as well. To him, the sea god's overwhelming power wasn't entirely a good thing. It meant that Kali City would be in a weaker position, unless Mei Gongzi could become an emperor. But now, with the mounting pressure from the ancestral court, Kali City had no choice but to rely on the sea god's power. Through this tribulation, he also wanted to see how the sea god's emissary, or perhaps the sea god himself, would be willing to assist them. Tang San continued flying forward. Even without wings, his speed was not lacking at all. By utilizing gravity, he could even surpass the Dragon Rock transformation in a burst of speed over very short distances. While using the Dragon Rock transformation, he had to flap his wings, but manipulating gravity took only an instant. This was one of the enhancements brought by the Golden Armor transformation. It didn't take long for them to reach far away from the coast. The deeper they ventured into the sea, the more they felt the vastness of the endless blue sea, naturally invoking a sense of awe. The Peacock Great Demon King didn't say anything, but he remained vigilant in his heart. He worried about what would happen if the sea god turned against them, but reason told him that the sea god had no reason to do so. Finally, the Peacock Great Demon King couldn't hold back anymore and asked Tang San, "How far do we need to go?" Tang San replied, "As far as possible. Mei Gongzi's tribulation will be more intense than that of ordinary demons due to her profound foundation and dual bloodlines. If we stay too close to the shore, Kali City might sense the disturbance. I plan to go about 200 kilometers out. Even if they sense the commotion, few would dare to come and investigate." When Zhang Haoshuan underwent his tribulation, he hadn't gone this far because it was just an ordinary tribulation. But Mei Gongzi was different. She now possessed divine consciousness and had 2 first-tier bloodlines, immense strength, exceptional talent, and the recognition of the celestial plume. The tribulation was fair and adjusted according to the cultivator's power, so hers would undoubtedly be terrifying. At the same time, the stronger the lightning tribulation, the better the purification effect it had. Successfully overcoming it would greatly enhance future potential. That was why Tang San advised Mei Gongzi to absorb as much of the lightning tribulation's power as she could during her breakthrough. Understood. The Peacock Great Demon King nodded. This distance was still within his control range unless they encountered an emperor-level threat. Even in that case, he was confident in his ability to escape. Being a Peak Great Demon King with a first-tier bloodline was not just for bragging rights. There was good reason he had been able to fight off the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor. Tang San continued to fly forward. Through his spiritual perception, he noticed that the farther they went out at sea, the stronger the aura of the sea creatures became. The weaker sea creatures would stop and worship him upon sensing his aura, while the stronger ones would quickly flee. This isn't the Douluo continent of old. The depths of the endless blue sea surely have many strong beings. They may not be comparable to the demon continent in terms of top beings, but they can't be lacking in numbers. Tang San slowly spread his hands to his sides, and his bloodline aura burst forth. To prevent Mei Gongzi from being affected by powerful beings in the endless blue sea during her tribulation, he began to merge his bloodline power with his spiritual power, exerting a stronger deterrent force upon the beings below the surface. The furnace-like bloodline aura that the Peacock Great Demon King had felt before reappeared, now fused with spiritual power. To his senses, Tang San seemed like a small sun above the sea, radiating scorching energy. Wherever he flew, the endless blue sea below became calmer. The Peacock Great Demon King could even sense that Tang San seemed to be absorbing something from the sea to replenish himself as he released his aura. Although this young man wasn't yet a god, the Peacock Great Demon King could clearly feel that he was already stronger than many demon kings. This kind of bloodline fluctuation was something that not even himself, let alone the average demon king, possessed. He truly wondered what kind of bloodline Tang San had. 200 kilometers wasn't a short distance, but it wasn't too far either. In the distance, Tang San's spiritual power detected a small island. His eyes lit up, and he immediately adjusted his direction, flying toward the island. Mei Gongzi and the Peacock Great Demon King, after all, were not sea creatures. Being on solid ground would be more advantageous for the tribulation. They had already ventured deep into the sea, where the water was crystal clear and a deep blue. As they approached the island, the water gradually became shallower, until a white sandy beach came into view. Tang San said, "Let's undergo the tribulation on this island. It's quite suitable here." Looking at the crystal clear blue waters surrounding the island, Mei Gongzi couldn't help but exclaim, "This place is so beautiful." Tang San smiled and said, "Yes, the sea is truly beautiful, all of it. If you like, I can take you out to sea in the future. Everyone knows that the sea is blue, but there are different shades of blue, and there are also many other colors." Mei Hongxi responded. The Peacock Great Demon King watched them with a raised eyebrow, somewhat surprised. He knew his daughter's character well. Mei Gongzi had been aloof since childhood, rarely interacting with others. After attending school, she made very few friends at Kali Academy. Far as he knew, she only acted naturally with that young man, Azura. Now this Tang San just invited her to go out to sea, and she agreed so naturally? Have they known each other for a long time? There was a seed of doubt in his heart, and he even had a feeling that Mei Gongzi recovering so fast from her sadness had something to do with this young man before him. However, he said nothing. Tang San gave him a sense of great strength and mystery, especially with his incredibly powerful bloodline. More powerful, he now understood, than any first-tier bloodline he knew. As the emissary of the sea god, if Mei Gongzi could maintain a good relationship with him, it would undoubtedly benefit the future rule of the Peacock Demon clan over Kali City. Once Kali City could rely on an emperor, even the Crystal Phoenix Demon Emperor would have to think twice before acting. As long as the sea god's emissary could assist his daughter in successfully undergoing the tribulation today, the Peacock Great Demon King would have no problem considering him trustworthy. They landed together on the island, and saw that dense vegetation and coconut trees were everywhere. There were no signs of particularly intelligent life forms, but the lush, verdant growth made it seem anything but desolate. In particular, the extremely clear water by the shore gave it a very refreshing feeling. Tang San led Mei Gongzi and her father to a coconut tree. By this time the sky was bright, and the brilliant sunlight was shining on the island, causing the temperature to rise rapidly. "Meditate here for a while, make sure you are in your best state, and then we can start at any time." As he spoke, Tang San took off his coat and laid it on the shaded sand under the coconut tree, gesturing for Mei Gongzi to sit there. Mei Gongzi glanced at him, said nothing, and walked over to sit down. Tang San said, "When you feel ready for the tribulation, don't deliberately provoke it. Just keep cultivating, adjusting your bloodline fluctuations, and let your power naturally ascend to draw the lightning tribulation. In that state, the tribulation will be stronger, but the purification will be more thorough and suitable for your current cultivation level." "Okay," Mei Gongzi agreed, then sat cross-legged on Tang San's coat and closed her eyes to meditate. Tang San stood silently beside her, guarding her, feeling the energy fluctuations from Mei Gongzi. The Peacock Great Demon King walked to the beach and began setting up something on the ground. This was something he had prepared long ago to help divert some of the lightning's power for Mei Gongzi if necessary. Of course, it would only be used as a last resort. Actually, he had been planning to tell his daughter the exact same things Tang San had just told her. The lightning tribulation was certainly a crucial step and a challenging hurdle in the cultivation process, but it was also a great opportunity. The way one overcame it made a significant difference in the end result. The human body's potential was almost exhausted at the peak of the Ninth Order, and the tribulation process was not just a transformation, but also a manner of acquiring more potential. The greater this potential, the more space for future growth. Every emperor had undergone extremely intense lightning tribulation purification. Some powerful races even forbade the use of any external assistance during tribulation to ensure their members received the best purification, and ultimately had stronger foundations. However, Mei Gongzi was too important to the Peacock Demon clan. The Peacock Great Demon King didn't know how strong her tribulation would be, so he carefully set up some precautions. If necessary, he would rather her purification be somewhat less thorough than risk her failing. Tang San silently guarded Mei Gongzi, whose bloodline power began to circulate faster as she meditated. The flight hadn't consumed much of her energy, and she quickly returned to her peak state. Her bloodline power kept circulating without pause, and her spiritual power fluctuated rapidly with it. Her aura gradually began to radiate outward, and a silver glow quietly emerged. On her forehead, the peacock golden crown appeared, and its dazzling golden patterns gradually transitioned into a platinum color. Her aura also grew increasingly stronger. According to the ancestral tenets of the clan, only those with the peacock golden crown could inherit the clan, and now Mei Gongzi was showing her potential to become the topmost heir. Don't rush. Go steadily, we have plenty of time. Your physique, bloodline, and spirit must fully merge. Also, remember that during the tribulation, the evolution of your divine consciousness is even more crucial than your physical transformation. Tang San's calm voice echoed in Mei Gongzi's ears in spiritual consciousness, soothing her agitation about the impending tribulation and restoring her calm. The Peacock Great Demon King had finished all his preparations. Hearing Tang San's words, his mouth twitched slightly. Tang San was more observant than he, her father, was, and he wasn't even a god. How did he know all these things? Mei Gongzi's aura continued to intensify. The bright silver glow around her even caused the light around her to distort slightly. It also gave off some unique energy fluctuations. She was the master acknowledged by the celestial plume. As her cultivation reached this peak state, she naturally began to be influenced by the celestial plume. Tang San silently sensed the energy changes in Mei Gongzi, and his expression became solemn. His divine consciousness fluctuated, and his voice echoed directly in her sea of consciousness. During the tribulation, do not use the celestial plume's power. If necessary, use the sword intent of the Azura sword, but do not use the celestial plume. You cannot allow its power to imprint itself in your divine consciousness during the tribulation. Your foundation for the future is the Azura sword, not the celestial plume. Do you understand? Mei Gongzi was in a meditative state and couldn't respond directly, but her divine consciousness slightly fluctuated, indicating her agreement. Tang San relaxed slightly. He realized that revealing his other identity to Mei Gongzi had its benefits. If it were the ordinary Tang San saying this to her, she might not listen. Why didn't he want her to use the celestial plume against the tribulation? Because Tang San didn't want her too entangled with the celestial plume. The celestial plume's power was elusive but difficult to break free from. Once it was used or relied upon, it could easily cause future problems and trouble. The backlash from an artifact like the celestial plume was something even god kings couldn't withstand. The mistakes of his previous life must not be repeated in this one. Once the celestial plume fully recognized its master and accompanied Mei Gongzi through the tribulation, it would be imprinted in her body and divine consciousness forever, making it impossible to get rid of. When Mei Gongzi faced danger or trouble, the celestial plume's power would naturally interfere, binding her to it. In the future, she would be forced to keep using the celestial plume. This would be fine if it were a normal divine item, but that was not the case. If its power was overused, the terrifying backlash would claim her life. Although the probability was low and would only occur far in the future, Tang San couldn't allow even that small probability to exist. Even a god king could not control certain things, and this was one such uncontrollable thing. The silver radiance grew more substantial, and Mei Gongzi's bloodline fluctuations intensified. The clear sky gradually began to change, with moisture seeming to spread in the high altitudes, slowly condensing and taking shape. She had now reached a critical point where she could face the arrival of the lightning tribulation at any moment. Tang San squinted slightly and stepped back a few paces, making sure there was enough distance between him and Mei Gongzi. The silver radiance grew increasingly stronger, and her bloodline power was advancing to a higher level. A clear humming sound began to emanate from her, and behind her, the silhouette of a giant silver peacock appeared. The peacock Great Demon King watched her transformation with a serious expression. He could feel the continuous surge of Mei Gongzi's bloodline fluctuations, seemingly without end. The surrounding space began to ripple and distort around her. This is completely different from my own tribulation. The peacock Great Demon King immediately sensed the difference. When he underwent his tribulation, the surrounding space had gradually shattered, forming a vacuum around him, making the tribulation easier and causing the lightning to dissipate in the vacuum. Only part of the lightning's power penetrated, stimulating his body's evolution. However, the changes in Mei Gongzi's aura now resulted in layers of spatial barriers blooming around her. As her aura grew stronger, these spatial forces seemed to merge with her, with the excess energy flowing into the silver peacock apparition behind her, making it clearer and larger. This illusory apparition was a manifestation of her bloodline essence, representing her bloodline power. In battle, this apparition would appear when her bloodline power was at its peak. But now, as Mei Gongzi was about to break through, the space elemental energy around her was enhancing her bloodline essence as if of its own initiative. It meant that Mei Gongzi had a deeper understanding of space and better compatibility with space than he had. Could this be the benefit of the celestial plume's acknowledgement? But she hasn't even used the celestial plume yet. The sky gradually darkened as the clouds above thickened, but no lightning appeared. However, the invisible pressure was growing more intense. My goodness, this lightning tribulation must be extraordinary. The peacock Great Demon King was secretly shocked and grew tense. It was common knowledge that the level of a tribulation was proportional to the talent and strength of the one undergoing it. Even though everyone was at the peak of the ninth order, the difference in talent and foundation could lead to vastly different tribulations. At this moment, the pressure from the tribulation would have made it difficult for an ordinary person to breathe. Meanwhile, the silver peacock behind Mei Gongzi was growing increasingly bright. Its enormous wings spread wide, and its tail feathers fanned out, creating a magnificent and stunning spectacle. Even though this was his daughter, the peacock Great Demon King couldn't help but feel a tinge of jealousy. If he had undergone such a grand tribulation, would he have become an emperor too? In Mei Gongzi's tribulation process, he could already see the shadow of an emperor. If she succeeded, she would undoubtedly have the foundation to become an emperor. And her aura was still intensifying. Mei Gongzi's sensations were equally profound. She could feel her consciousness rapidly expanding in all directions. In her sea of consciousness, the divine consciousness that had already formed was continuously spreading outward, transforming her spiritual power. The towering red light, the true core of her divine consciousness, shone ever brighter. Her bloodline power, influenced by her spiritual aura, was slowly concentrated and forced inward. She felt as though all her spiritual and bloodline power was converging into a single point. Her body seemed to be shrinking. It was as if she was returning to childhood, to infancy, to the womb. Though this was only a perception, it was triggered by her inner transformation. The space element around her seemed almost alive. In her perception, the motes of elemental energy spinning around her were like her loyal guards or her subjects, willingly protecting her and constantly converging toward her, becoming part of her. They even seemed to be cheering and celebrating because, influenced by Mei Gongzi's aura, they were evolving as well. This feeling was so wonderful that it soothed the last remnants of Mei Gongzi's chaotic emotions. She had completely immersed herself in this process of ascension. She seemed to vaguely see herself standing at the pinnacle of this plane and could faintly glimpse some scenes that she'd never seen before, scenes of the future. It was the aura of the celestial plume. As her aura ascended, the energy of the celestial plume naturally began to flow into her sea of consciousness, starting to merge with her. But just then, Mei Gongzi remembered Tang San's previous instructions. In her sea of consciousness, that red light blossomed, forcibly blocking the celestial plume and preventing it from entering her divine consciousness. The celestial plume clearly showed signs of reluctance, even conveying a sense of grievance. It struggled to force its way in, but Mei Gongzi did not waver. Although she couldn't yet acknowledge Tang San as her husband from a previous life, her interactions with Tang San and fighting alongside Azura had built absolute trust in this man. Therefore, no matter how the celestial plume tried to enter her sea of consciousness, she mercilessly blocked it.